Trading Time with your host, John Rousseau.
Thomas Bourne. Just love Thomas Bourne. He's such a great guy to run into in a coffee shop. He's a great guy on a job site. He's got an amazing story from Switzerland and Europe to the Caribou in British Columbia down to the Okanagan. We're gonna catalog and outline his journey as a craftsman and as an artist. And I'm really excited to share with you my conversation with Thomas Bourne today. Enjoy.
It's always that when there's lots of work, which there still has been lots of work, I think it probably went down a little bit, all these little outfits show up and you just get shitty work and you pay a lot of money for shitty work and then you have to redo it. So you sometimes pay twice if you're not lucky.
Yeah, there's some times where you pay 3 times because you pay somebody to build it, then you have to pay somebody to come in and take it out, and then you have to pay somebody to put it back up again.
I know.
And I can remember when I started my career for some of these firms in Penticton, it was that. The tile was installed completely incorrectly in this scenario. No waterproofing membrane incorporated into it. You just got like a bathroom scenario. It's sitting right on top of plywood. Well, how long is that going to last for?
Yeah.
Take it out.
Did you see? Was it on the news? I think it was on the news. That little issue, Mr. Reno Homes
saw
and
that.
Homes. Oh my God!
Yeah, I saw that.
That's an interesting little.
Little
story.
Yeah, I know. Some of the way that they crank housing out back east. I mean, I saw another similar to that where they're saying, oh, we got this contractor in to do some spray foaming in our attic.
Yeah.
And they didn't properly admix the 2 components.
Oh.
So you don't have enough component A to component B, and component B is incredibly toxic if it's off-gassing into your environment. Well, the house is condemned. Tear it down. Which is the same scenario as that, right? And so we have these trades running around, as you've pointed out, where there's so much work, not enough training, not enough qualifications or time in the field, making catastrophic mistakes in the industry, costing homeowners their houses at times.
Yeah.
So
it's a very, very unfortunate things. And I think, I don't know, some of the things are, I wonder if they're regulated. Wasn't it that issue with that crane which just collapsed?
Right.
They say that's not really regulated.
Isn't that interesting? Something that's swinging around massive loads in the sky.
I know. It's very.
That was that Mission Group incident in Kelowna. Yeah. I wonder what the.
It's very.
Yeah. So the industries that aren't regulated or regulations take off or were never regulated to start with. Because, I mean, a lot of what we've seen is industries that used to be regulated but aren't now.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so you're kind of hoping that the journeymen that are occupying those higher positions are doing the proper training and passing the proper knowledge on. Therefore, we don't need the oversight.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That would be the hope.
Yeah.
But because our apprenticeship program has delaminated to such an extent.
That is always something which, I never wanted to be one of those guys who I immigrate to Canada and all I do is just bitch about how things are here and how great everything was in Switzerland.
Yes.
But that is always one thing I said, and that also helped me get going in some of my adventures I did with jobs. You could not just go in Switzerland and say, I'm a roofing company, and then basically learn by doing. You have to have somebody, because you have to register that company, and then you have to have somebody who is certified, who did a trade, who did education over an extended period of time. I always use the example of friends we had over there. She wanted to open a gelateria with, coffee and all the different ice creams and stuff. Yes. And she had to do a 4-year school to be able to open that gelateria. I bet you here you could walk down the road, buy a good location and open it.
Yeah, you could.
All you would have to probably do is like you would get some food safe inspections and stuff like
That's
that.
right, but very
your
simple.
ability
Yeah.
would not matter. So there, you can't do that. So I don't know how deep into different categories of work environment that reaches. But just the way Switzerland is, I think it probably reaches just about everything, you know?
It's integrated into every industry where there is an oversight.
Yeah, I think so. And that can be a huge pain at the time, but it also has its positives because you probably run less into issues like that, you know?
You have community standards that you know that when you step into a building, you're going to be safe. It's going to be a certain way. When you eat out at a restaurant, it's going to be safe. A certain way.
I would think so. Yes, I really would think so. Yeah.
There are community standards.
Yeah.
So yeah, you are of interest to me because of your. First of all, as you've pointed out, you immigrated from Europe, from Switzerland. That's interesting to me, and I want to talk about that. But also your experience in the trades and running job sites, and then transition to stay in the industry. But you were also a photographer. You help people with their real estate listings in order to build an online presence with their photography and video work. Let's start at the beginning. Let's start in Switzerland. What was it like growing up in Europe at the time? And tell me about that.
So I grew up in a city named Basel, which is right on the border of Germany and France. So you probably say like northwestish kind of thing, on the knee of the River Rhine. At the time, about 250,000 people. Core of an old town which historically dated back to before the Romans.
Wow.
Yeah, they found fortifications earlier than the Roman. There was a Roman fortress there, which was known, but they found fortifications even beneath that whole Roman built.
And that's only as far as they've dug. Who knows what else was there?
Who knows? Yeah.
How long?
Yeah. And it's actually interesting. You can look, they left that hole open and put a glass dome over it. You can stand there and look down into that hole and you see the different layers of stuff. It's
amazing.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah.
Cool.
So at the time, I honestly don't know exactly how it is these days. I would think it hasn't much changed. I know they renamed some of the schooling system a little bit, but at the time you would do a 2-year kindergarten, which it's your kindergarten, you go and socialize and, learn how to socialize with other kids and stuff. And then you do 4 years of what was called primary school. The primary school was from 6 to 10. And you have one teacher. He teaches all the things you learn in primary school to you. He's also your gym teacher.
Same teacher? Those whole years?
Those 4 years. Same teacher. Yeah.
Well, that's really interesting. You get to build a relationship with somebody.
You do, yeah, you do. He wasn't the best gym teacher. All we do was we played dodgeball for 4 years. which was fun, it was fun, but that was really all we did.
It was just dodgeball.
And then after those 4 years, you have possibilities where you want to go. Now, these possibilities are accordingly to how smart you are. So if you're not a smart kid, you go what was called, I guess, kind of translated to secondary school.
Yes.
And if you would do secondary school, you would then have opportunities like go into work in stores as a clerk and stuff like that, Mm-hmm. And then you had kind of like a middle thing, what we called Realschule, which would be, I don't know, real school. if you literally translate it. And that then would get you more into trades. Auto mechanics, carpenters, all those kind of things. If you wanted after these 4 years, there were other possibilities. One was a 2-year and one was a 4-year, going more into business schooling. Or then from there you go into a trade. You learn a trade. So that is what I did. I learned to become, I guess, what would be called here a millwright. It's probably the closest.
Millwright.
Yeah. And then the highest one, which was called the gymnasium, not as in a gymnasium in a gym, it was just called the gymnasium. That then basically brings you after that to university. So if you go to the gymnasium after you become a lawyer, a doctor, whatever you need the university for. Interesting enough, when I did my apprenticeship, we had a lot of guys who did their gymnasium and did some university years. They come back and then they wanted to learn a trade.
Interesting.
Yeah, they felt they needed a trade. They just did not want to be just smart people. They wanted hands-on or something. I think that is still very much the same, but they named everything a little bit different, which I don't know exactly what they named, but I think it was probably that secondary school maybe sounded a little too bad because you were already at the bottom. So I think that's why they changed it. That's just my guess. I can't say that. Yeah. I liked growing up where I grew up. I had a good growing up. I grew up relatively close to some little woodlands and agricultural areas. So we were always running around in the woods and over the agricultural fields, which sometimes got us into troubles because, the farmer didn't like when we ran over there.
No.
But not very often. So we spent a lot of time outside.
You had a good crew of friends.
Our time off, yeah. We went on little adventures.
Yeah.
Packed a lunch and took an hour hike into some of those woodlands, and not that there were not some closer, but these further away were more interesting.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
We also built a little fort in the backyard of the house I grew up. I was fortunate enough that the house belonged to my grandmother at the time. So even though there, was sometimes some issues because of, we did hammer nails and made noise and stuff. But yeah, we built a little fortress in the back. Very simple, very interesting. And I was there for quite a few years. So we had, I think we had a pretty cool upbringing that way.
Cool.
And then
what were your parents into? What was their industry?
My mom had worked, and after I started my apprenticeship and was gone the whole day, she went back to do store clerk. Mm-hmm. And my dad was a millwright.
Amazing.
Yeah, my dad was a millwright. That's how I wanted to become an archaeologist. That was my initial goal, but I would have to go to university.
Yeah.
So I wasn't smart enough. And I was also not ambitious enough to learn all the other things I need to learn. I was very, very good in history. That was interesting to me, But all the other things you needed to go to the gymnasium and then to university, they just did not interest me.
Yes.
So the archaeology went out the door after a while.
It seems as though that you could have been an archaeologist.
I think so.
You're telling me that you're not smart enough. You were a very smart guy.
You know what? If I have interest enough in something and I put my head to it, I probably could have. Yeah, I probably could have. But essentially the way I chose has then later on in life opened up a lot of doors for me, like here.
Yeah.
And so that was of advantage to this life I'm living here now.
Yeah. Tell me about, I know that Switzerland has a policy that everybody needs to serve in the military, in the armed forces. Tell me where that came into the process. Where did you elect to spend that time? Do you have a choice where you spend those 2 years?
So first of all, it's not 2 years.
Okay.
It's used to be 17 weeks. I think it's now down to 15 weeks.
Okay.
When you come to age, so you do that after like 20. That's the time when you do it. So for me, it was after my apprenticeship was finished. Right. So that was good.
Okay, so hold on a second here. You were finished your apprenticeship before you were 20?
Yeah, it's 4 years. So
you started at 16?
Yes, apprenticeship,
That's amazing.
So six to 10 primary school, then 4 years of whatever 3 of the schools you go in. When you do the school I did and the choice I did with the apprenticeship, I had to do 1 more. So I did a 5th year and then 4 year of apprenticeship.
Amazing.
And then when you come to that age, every healthy young Swiss man has to go, or used to, I don't know if they still do it, probably, do a sports test. And then accordingly to that sports test, you will be put into a certain military troop.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, obviously, right?
It kind of makes sense.
Strong guy, you're going to be a Navy SEAL. Yeah.
So I was a swimmer. I swam from 15 to 20, and I was decently good. So I would have actually, like my sports result would have actually put me into the Swiss kind of like Marines or whatever you would call that.
Yes.
But because I was swimming, and I think I still kind of wanted it to go on, but I was kind of like not completely there anymore. But it gave me advantages because my coach addressed the head coach of another swim team, and he had a higher rank in the military and had to, when you want to become an officer in Switzerland, you have to go through the school to become an officer, and then you have to serve a certain amount of weeks that you then are an officer.
Yes.
So kind of do your practicum, I would say, So he was on the stage to do this practicum. So they managed to get me into where he did his practicum, which was at the time a troop called Luftschutztruppen, which basically means air protection troops, which has nothing much to do with protecting the air or the airspace. It is a military fire troop.
So you'd be running like medium to heavy artillery on the ground?
Nothing. All you had was your rifle.
Okay.
We had very, very dated tank kind of...
Anti-tank missile?
Yeah, anti-tank missile. No, there's not even a freaking missile. It's like, if you didn't hold that thing like crazy, it had a scope.
Oh, yeah.
If you didn't hold that thing down like as much as you could, that scope would give you...
Right.
Yeah, a shiner, a nice shiner.
Yeah,
a big shiner.
Lovely.
Yeah. So that was that, because the idea was, if a city gets bombed, you go in after. We had, like what the fire department has here, we had like these basins, we had pumps, we had
water cannons
and stuff.
Yep.
And that's what you would go and do. And then you also had a relatively extensive first aid training to, go dig people out and give them first aid, and then bring them to wherever you bring them. And interestingly enough, always after these sports tests, the runt of all these sports tests ended up in that troop, even though it was a very physical troop. But that's where they put them. It's changed now a little bit because they realized that's not going to work. You can't have a guy with a back issue carrying a half-dead body out of a rubble somewhere, But it was very interesting. And as much as I didn't like going, looking back, we had lots of good times, and we did some fun stuff, actually,
Yeah.
One time we built a bridge over a very shallow, but probably about 100 feet wide river, Out of scrap wood. We gathered all over the place from carpentry shops and building sites and stuff. And yeah, it took us a whole week, but it was fun. And
Amazing.
yeah. And we drove a Jeep over it in the end.
No way.
Yes.
You tested it even.
Yeah. And then the next, that was right on a Saturday. And then the weekend we went home for a break. And then over that weekend, it rained like hell. And it washed the whole thing.
And it was in some farmer's field afterwards,
Everywhere. It was
on the
everywhere.
shore.
We had some equipment in there which we had to go and find again because it was some I don't know, you call them hoppecker too here? Does that say something to you, hoppecker?
I don't know what that is.
It's a device. It's about that big. You feed probably a 3/4 inch, half inch, or 3/4 inch steel rope in it, and then you crank it.
Oh, okay. Come along.
Kind of like a come along. Yeah. It's on an endless base. It doesn't go onto a spool. It's an endless base. It just pulls through.
Yeah.
So we had a few of those to keep it in place. So they all went down river too.
Right.
So we had to find them again. We found them again.
But it sounds like everything that you're talking about in this experience, all useful, practical, hands-on reinforcement training, and for young citizens to have, like the type of people that you would want to be in community with. They're useful. If there was a problem, you could grab one of them and go, there's some common ground that we have here to solve this problem. And
you know, it's not just what you learn there, or if you learn something which will help you in your life, just like literally from what you did there, but it is the ability to learn how to sleep with 100 guys in one room and keep it clean. Well, that's not necessarily a little thing, but things like that, you have to be social to a certain point. If you cannot fit in, if you cannot go along with it, you will not have a good time at all. And in Switzerland, it was to the point that, there were people, some because of mental issues and stuff, that they were able to get out of it or did not even have to join in the first place. They will have issues, or would have had issues, finding jobs after.
And is that just simply because of a records perspective, or you're saying that because they're socially awkward, people wouldn't hire them?
I think both.
You'd be like, oh, on your record here, it shows that you dropped out of the military. How come?
Why was that exactly?
You couldn't fit in.
If I would go and apply for a job as a regular soldier, have done my service, or did 2 stages of more training and more practicum to become an officer, a low-ranked or the first level of officer, that officer would more likely get the job.
Of course.
I had already, when I did my apprenticeship, I when I did my apprenticeship, I went for 2 years. I did it in a huge multinational chemical concern. So you go through different workshops. So I had in a few of these workshops, some of the, what do you call those guys? Shop manager or so, they said, like, if you're going to go to the military and you become an officer, I guarantee you a job here.
Amazing.
Today.
Because they know that you're coming out of that institution with a certain level of focus, dedication, and ability.
Yeah. How it is today, I don't know.
How long ago was that?
I'm 61 now. That was when I was 20, so that's 41 years ago.
40 more, yeah. So so that was back when I was born. Well, I just turned 40. So yeah. So back in the 80s.
Yeah. So I've seen something very interesting the other day on YouTube. Interesting enough, it was mentioned to me by a Canadian citizen. I saw this. Very interesting. Check it out. So there was a guy from the States. He was going and compared the Swiss gun culture.
I saw this.
Have you seen that?
I have. It's very interesting.
Isn't that interesting?
I loved that video.
I did not even know that there was such a big gun culture in Switzerland.
Really?
No, I didn't. Because I knew, obviously, because I had to do it, that every year you go and you do that shooting, that obligated shooting, you know. But most don't like it. That I knew.
Right.
I didn't like it. It's like, oh my God, Saturday morning, I have to give my Saturday morning again to go and do that stupid shooting,
Yes.
You wanted that gun, just gone as far as you could. I remember when I went to Canada and I was able to bring that gun in. Here, it's my gun back. It was one of the happiest days in my life.
Really?
Here's my gun. Take it. Yes.
I'm done.
Gone. I'm gone, you know.
Right.
But then in that YouTube, there's all these young kids who like shooting.
Marksmanship,
you know?
yeah.
Marksmanship, which that never bothered me. I always enjoyed the marksmanship, and I was a pretty decent shooter. But everything around it that you had to, I think that was the most thing, you know. If it would have brought to me differently, I maybe would have had a different approach to it, you know.
I see. So if it wasn't mandated that you're...
Yes,
right.
yes. And if you did not have to take that thing apart and back together in whatever it was, like, I think you had to take it apart in 30 seconds and put it back together in 30 seconds.
Yes.
And have it like spick and span clean every time after you went shooting and stuff like that. Because when I came here about a year in, I did purchase a gun. Mm-hmm. And I went and I shot a few times just to, you know, sort of put the scope in place and everything. And then the rules changed and I didn't want to do the testing again. And I just sold it. But
that was a really interesting video where he's comparing the quality, and this is one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about, was the quality of the social experience in that country versus the quality of the social experience in the United States.
Yeah.
And, you know, often you hear so many complaints about the United States and, we just need to implement some more gun control and we need some domestic gun control. I'm thinking to myself, it's like, your domestic problems that you have are a consequence of your problems that you have abroad. You go around and you blow people's countries up. Do you expect that those people are going to come back to your country, those veterans?
Shake hand. Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like they're going to come back unhealthy.
Yeah.
You're sending a signal into the universe that, this is what we do. This is our culture.
Yeah.
When you take a look at a country like the Swiss, I mean, they're not going out and invading countries all the time. But if somebody were to invade them, they would be able to defend themselves. Yes. They're using the firearms in a healthy manner.
Yeah.
In a defensive position instead of an offensive position.
And you know, while I was over there, and I don't know how it is these days, but while I was over there, I never heard but of one incident. And that guy turned the weapon on himself.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
The only gun crime was a suicide.
It was a suicide. Yeah.
That's unbelievable, Thomas.
And it was done with a pistol. He was an officer. He had a pistol. It was done with a pistol.
Wow.
That was the only one I ever heard of. And you had like they all have their guns at home with one full magazine of ammunition. Now, the bullets are in a little container which looks like a spray can, or used to look like a spray can. So you're not allowed to open it. It's not in your actual magazine. It's in there. But you had it at home. Then after those 17 weeks, then you go every year for 3 weeks. I think it's 2 years now, 2 weeks now every year.
Yeah.
So while I did those every year repetitive courses, my job was to deal with the ammunition, actually.
Really?
Yeah. So I could have dragged home bullets and hand grenades and nobody would ever know of it. All I had to do is like hook them on as used. That was it. Yeah. You know, you go out into the field somewhere and you shoot a bunch of ammunition out, and I could have just added 50 more of a shot, you know, or 2 hand grenades. A friend of mine had a hand grenade at home.
Yeah.
Yeah, I took it home.
Yeah.
Nobody was thinking about something like that, you know?
Well, because you guys had communities that were tight-knit. You're talking about these experiences that you're having with multiple people. You're having to get along.
And, you know, sometimes you didn't, but I think eventually it was figured out.
You worked it out.
You worked it out, you know? Yeah. I think the worst case I've ever seen where they actually, I don't know what they did in the end, if there were consequences after, but it was in one of these repetition courses. And there was a gay guy. And some guys, it was in the evening, I don't know if they had alcohol, they went and did not nice things to him. They were not physical to him, but other things I do not want to mention. And they then took that guy and they let him go from the military. Like he was able to go with no consequences, because if you don't want to join these days, you can, but you have to pay a tax.
Yes.
So they let him go. So that was the worst case. And when you talk about camaraderie, that was the worst case. And I think these guys, they were probably just drunk and really stupid at that evening, and just kind of
Obnoxious 20-year-olds.
yeah.
Back in a time where there was ignorance and bigotry around it.
Yeah. So, there will be always, where there is people, there will be always situations like that.
Yeah.
But it's just not, I don't know, I just never felt it was that bad, We bullied in school, we got bullied, all these things happen too, but I don't know, it just seems to be worse these days. Or maybe you just feel it's worse because it's so pointed out these days.
So the entertainment mechanism that we encounter all the time, I call it like the Netflix culture. We've got this Netflix culture, right? And there's heroes and bad guys in the Netflix culture. And who are you and how do you fit into this? And you may not know your neighbors because you're spending too much time inside in the Netflix culture on your cell phone or whatever. You encounter a neighbor, you freeze. Oh my God, who are you? What are you doing here?
Yeah.
You hear a knock on the door. Oh my God, what is that? Is that the police? No, it's your fucking neighbor. Do you know what I mean? Right? Like, and we've got this sort of anxiety about like social interaction and all of these things. And you wonder why like violence is up in a community.
Yeah.
Right. It's because the entertainment that we're taking in is predominantly violence based.
It is, yes. It's right. It's a lot of it is.
A lot of it's violent based and it's glorified.
Yeah. And it's you know what? It's not just glorified. It's also humor. Is that a word? Humorized.
Yes, it is.
It's humorized.
It's a parody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like,
this isn't a big deal.
No.
Shooting somebody in the head, no big deal.
You laugh about it. Just the way they're able to film it. It looks funny.
Yeah.
Even though guy just got bullied in the head is dead, So I think all of that helps.
To desensitize people to do horrific things.
Yeah. If you're mentally unstable, I believe if you have a normal common sense, you can laugh at that and say like, yeah, it's a bunch of bullshit. It's a movie, But it sounds like more and more people out there with mental issues, which may not have that capability
to turn it off,
because they are literally there in a whatever amazing stress or panic or whatever is going on inside them,
A state of psychosis.
Yeah.
Potentially a perpetual state of psychosis where they can't differentiate reality from fantasy.
Yeah. Yeah. However they got to that, who knows, but they're in that stage. So they have that, they see that as a maybe only way out for whatever reason or whatever it will bring to them.
Thomas, I'm seeing something recently about this that, how some people are as we're talking about, fascinated with like perpetrating a gun crime on somebody, right? Like what we've just described, somebody who's potentially locked into this state of thinking and this pattern and they're in their little world and they go out and do a mass shooting. There are people that are fascinated not by firearms, but by fire. And I think that we're starting to see the consequences of that in our communities. And
we have already.
It's interesting to see recently that guy that was charged with 14 counts of arson in Quebec. He lit 14 forest fires, right? And you think about it, you look around, it's like, I don't remember, and I lived here my whole life, I don't remember all these fires starting up all over the place. And I know that these are cyclical events and it happens when a forest has a lot of fuel in it and it's dry and there's lightning. I get it. But, I wonder if we can attribute a lot of these instances to psychopaths, pyromaniacs, lighting shit on fire out in the forest.
I think like one thing you can determine is like, has the fire been by lightning?
Right.
So if there is no dry or wet thunderstorms, it won't be lightning. So then it has to be somehow human cause. Yeah. Now, to determine, was this an accident or was it purposely done, I would think is very hard. I know that there was a guy, because he was seen along the KVR in Penticton, just above the marina, which it was pretty sure it was him who lighted that fire, which I think it was 2 or 3 years ago where there was the fire in that section. Because people saw him, come running up kind of thing, and he was trying to get away really fast. So either he did it purposely or he was just like lighting a doobie and kind of, I don't know, got out of control. Yeah.
Flicking an ash.
Yeah. Who knows? It was warm enough. He did not need a fire to warm himself. So it was in the middle of summer. So, but that is something which actually, to be honest with you, surprises me that it has not happened more. Like, what if a guy really wants, what would hold him up? Like a year like last year, you could go in a day easily to several spots and get something going.
Think of the destruction you could unleash.
Unbelievable.
I mean, just 2 summers ago, we had a squatter up here in the valley.
I remember that.
And just lit the hillside on fire. And it was right at the time of day where if I didn't look out the window and see that smoke plume, the light was coming down, it was getting dark. And what happens when the light goes down and it starts to get dark in this part of the world is the wind comes out of the west. This whole canyon would have been gone. Overnight, it would have been gone. And so luckily, we had enough time. I called the fire service. They were able to deploy not only a crew, but they had a helicopter and a bomber that hit it and got it out.
Yeah.
But like, you go over there and you look, and it's just a squatter's camp. There's a tent set up with a bunch of garbage, and this guy like lit a fire and fucked off.
Yeah.
Like, this is just in our backyard.
Yeah.
So that sense of community that you're describing, where you came from, where you're hearing of such low instances of crime happening. I mean, or is that the
Don't
case?
say low instances of crime.
Okay.
Don't say low instances of crime. That's just
specific
crime from people which are or have gone to the military, because if you've done your service, you used to be able to keep the gun. Didn't have to give it back. You could keep it. Because crime in Switzerland has.
As a result of what, do you think?
Russia opening up, unfortunately. As soon as that wall fell.
Yes.
Crime
immigration?
Yeah. Yeah, crime rates went up brutally.
So as a result of immigration...
Well, I don't know if you can...
Well, I don't think you can say it out loud. We can't say it out loud, but let's just take a look at the correlation.
No, it was definitely like, and I'm talking brutal crime. They were apparently, and this is all things I heard from third party. This isn't something I experienced myself. What I experienced myself was daily violence. Like, I had a neighbor which on a regular basis beat his wife up, and it was just a normal thing. They were from Turkey, I believe. And they were the nicest people when you would meet them outside.
Wow.
Yeah. They were like, hey, how are you doing? And the nicest people. But then you could hear them beat them up. Go down there. A friend of mine used to work in immigration. So in political immigration, like refugees.
Okay.
So he said, you get this family from East. Didn't really matter much where they came from, or if it was like Yugoslavia or Turkey or anyway, wherever there was a political situation where they would say like, yeah, that is politically bad enough. You can be a political refugee.
Yes.
They would take him in. So he had these whole families. So he said they sometimes would go after each other to the point of stabbing and stuff like that. And then the police moves in and they all sit there and nobody did anything.
Wow.
Yeah, they're all like nice and dandy with each other again and it's all good.
And then they leave and they pull the knives back out?
Maybe they keep going. Who knows? Yeah. Wow. It's a different culture. It's that I guess, almost that eye for an eye, as far as I understand it. Like if you brother gets beat up, you go and beat his brother up worse, It's violence gets answered with more violence.
Tit for tat.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. So, where were we?
Well, no, I mean, this is all really interesting background, because I mean, I've heard about the apprenticeship program in Europe, and I really think that it's a very intelligent system, especially when compared to how idiotic our education system is here in Canada, and the support that the trades get. We really discount the importance of skilled trades, millwrights, mechanical engineers, all of that. There are a whole bunch of jobs that happen in our country that no one ever sees, right? The last guest that we had on for many years specialized in the production of feller buncher heads, right? And you say that word to somebody, they have no idea what that is, right? It's a machine that grabs a tree, cuts it off, puts it on a truck.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And all you see is the 2x4.
Yes.
Right? You don't see... No. You don't see him wrenching on a machine in -40 in Grand Prairie in the wintertime.
Yeah.
Right? So there are a lot of jobs that people don't even know exist.
Yes.
Right? That are very important jobs that keep our country going.
Yeah.
Millwright being one of them.
Yeah. And I think
millwrights are needed everywhere.
I think so. Yeah. I think it's a very, I believe it gave me, and I don't know exactly how you educated over here, but it gave me a very broad spectrum of diverse fields in ways of everything, of course, to do with metal, But you can translate that into other materials too. It doesn't necessarily have to be metal, And it teaches you, I remember the first year, pretty much the whole first year, all we did was metal files, filing little metal things which had to fit into each other at an accuracy or a tolerance of 1/100th of a millimeter.
Wow.
That is, when you hold that against the light like this, you see just the tiniest of light coming through that. That's thinner as a piece of paper. You had to, at the beginning, the first 4 months, you had blisters from freaking filing. Everything you can do with a machine, but we had to learn it by hand.
Wow.
We had to do, I remember one was a whole week. All we did was sawing different profiles to the tolerance of 1/10 of a millimeter. You had to be straight to the tolerance of 1/10 of a millimeter.
Wow.
It wasn't much fun, but it definitely teaches you something,
The importance of working with your hands and paying attention.
Yeah. And
your hand-eye coordination. Those are all really applicable things.
Yeah. And how to, use your body to achieve these things. Because you can mess it up pretty easily with not even knowing if you're not, if you're not balanced, if you don't have your equipment where you're working on at a specific height, and all those kind of things. And then, of course, all the different machines, the lathe, the metal lathe, and the mill, and drilling till the end of days.
Yeah. The lathe is a really important machine.
It is, yeah. It could be a very fun machine. You can do very interesting stuff with it. Not just metal.
Yeah.
And you can do anything on a metal lathe. You can turn wood on a metal lathe too. You don't need them. You can do a few little changes on it, and then off you go. Actually, I think we played with some wood. We were always allowed at Christmas to do some Christmas project. Made a little
decorations for mom.
Yeah, just something. Yeah. So we played with wood too. Pretty sure we did. Yeah.
So hands-on, really important tools, but also building that awareness of how important it is to work with your hands.
Yeah. You probably rarely ever use it again in life, ever like that, But you learned how to do it once, and it was definitely to advantage for me in my future to come.
So last night when I was preparing for these interviews, Karen said to me, she said, "Do you think our kids are aware that they have it better than we did when we were a kid?" She asked me the question. She said, "Did you know that you had it better than your dad growing up?" And so I think that this plays beautifully into that, because when you start by doing it the way Grandpa did it, you then realize, holy shit, I can press a button and the machine can just do this. What an amazing advantage. But at least you have that context.
So I think, first of all, my question is, do children really have it better these days?
Well, that's a very subjective question. In a lot of ways they do, in a lot of ways they don't.
I think that with all the I have that conversation a lot of times with my partner, and we not agree on everything, because I think we just huddle them too much these days.
We protect them.
We protect them too much. And interesting enough, I just saw something on the news the other day where they say, that it is okay to expose children to danger. And all they did was jumping over rocks or from one rock to another on a playground, So, so I don't know if they really have it better, because I think a lot of them, and I see that by listening to people who work with young people. And I'm not saying like preschool or school, like people which have gone now into the work field, they're not capable anymore, or shouldn't say all of them, but some of them are not capable anymore to deal with job stresses and criticism. Like if they do something wrong, they immediately fall apart. So I think it may look that they have it better. They are probably more spoiled, even though I have to say, I had a pretty good upbringing, I think. So did my dad. For the time he grew up, he had a pretty decent upbringing, I think.
Well, living in one of the most politically stable, richest countries of the world affords you that experience.
And he had good parents, even though his dad died really early. He was an avid collector of explosives. Him and his buddies, they went into France. There was a old
undetonated ordnance.
Old World War I battlefield.
Oh, lovely.
And that hand grenade still worked.
Oh, God.
So boom.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, my dad was 14 years old, so it was up to my grandma. And that was 25. That was just when the war started.
World War II.
World War II. Yeah. Wow. So, but I think they still when him and Mom told me about some of the things they did, they had, I think, a pretty good life.
Yeah.
Which I think today, it's always in relation to what you know.
That's right.
Like, if we know running around in the woods is great because we did that, we love that, I still love that, Kids today, they cannot relate to that anymore, or a lot of kids cannot relate to that anymore. They relate to a screen in front of them, And so that is, for the time being, that is the good thing for them. That is the fun thing for them. They cannot relate to dirty faces and, whatever, mud in your shoes and stuff like that. Because that's how they grew up. It's kind of like the same, I keep saying that, and I don't know if I'm right there, but I keep saying that when you look at what is very real right now again, Palestine, Israel, all they know is war.
That's right.
So war for them, yes, of course, when pardon my language, when the shit hits the fan like it just did now and still is doing, then of course it is terrible, but they're so used to it. If this would happen over here, we probably I don't know, we'd be freaking falling apart, They're still running around with their carts and go from one corner to the other, trying to survive wherever they can. But they're more used to it. So I think it's really a matter of what you're exposed to and what you're taught to how you feel about something. So I personally think children these days do not have it better in a way of life experience than what we had or what my dad had. Because I think at one point, some of them going to be having a pretty bad awakening. And you know how I think about the environment, particularly with that part. I think, I don't know, my gut tells me we passed the tipping point, that department.
Well, before we get into any of that,
no,
I just want to buttress what you're saying. We sent our daughter off to school, and I've always felt huge hesitation about that. I hated the public school system in this country. I think it's just an absolute joke. It's not to say there weren't good teachers or administrators, but by a whole, I just think that the whole method is flawed and doesn't really deliver the type of citizen that we require in order to have a successful experience in the country. So that's to say nothing of the disease pool of these schools. Every time Isla would come home, every 10 days we have some other variant of
that's
cold or flu or like running. I'm done. I'm out. It's over.
Yeah.
So we pulled her out and started homeschooling her, which was the best thing that we ever did for our family. And I knew that was the trajectory that we were on anyway.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted. But one of the programs that we have her enrolled in is every Wednesday, and it's called Forest School. And there's a group of facilitators. My mother-in-law is one of the facilitators. She's a master outdoors woman, and then another guy. And they take this group of kids out into the woods, and they make a fire. They'll do some whittling. They'll do some hiking. They'll build a shelter. They'll develop this little area out as like their base camp. Right. And then they'll, as you say, go run around in the woods and hit each other with sharp sticks.
Right.
Which is what we should be doing as a kid anyhow. Right.
Yeah.
And so, and she just loves it. And that's to say nothing of like the preparedness that she's going to have now to be a Canadian.
Yeah.
Right. She knows that she's going to need to have layers.
Yeah.
She's going to have water on board, good fitting boots and whatever. And when you go outside, it's not a joke.
Yeah.
Like you see a lot of people going out onto a ski hill. How many of those people that are on that chairlift have a book of matches in their pocket?
Yeah.
Right. Or a first aid kit.
Yeah.
Or a way to spend the night out in the woods without freezing to death. Right. So it's just having the awareness of your surroundings, which is what it sounds like your educational institutions gave you where you live. How do we better incorporate that for Canadians and teach them the things they want?
My dad gave me a lot of that, I think, because we ran around in the woods quite a bit. And then the Boy Scouts.
And Scouts too.
Yeah.
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 And the military then, of course. Yeah.
So to answer your question, do I think kids have it better or worse? I mean, obviously, living on a large acreage in the middle of the forest is a good start.
Yes.
Right. And when you take a look at the contrast, the juxtaposition of that, where you're like, I'm a kid living in the city where our greatest form of entertainment now is the Netflix culture that we were talking about.
Yeah.
Right. And this is the bus route that I take to go to my school where nobody's allowed to bully me anymore, which is another thing that you were talking about, right? You were bullied.
Yeah.
That prepared you for the adversity that you would encounter in the adult workplace, which I think is critical.
Yes.
So now we've taken all of we've taken the shop class out of school, right? We've taken the forest out of the school. Now you're in this sterile environment where everybody's accepted and no one's bullied and no one really knows how to do anything. And now here's your accreditation and go out into the workforce. Well, what happens when you encounter somebody in the workforce that rubs you the wrong way or bullies you or whatever? You don't know, as you've alluded to, you don't know how to deal with this person. Now you have a mental breakdown and now. Like, so do I think they have it worse? Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I do because they're not prepared.
Yeah, I think so. We make it, well, I should say we, I cannot say that. I never have brought a kid up, so I have to be careful with my judgmental statements, but it's just observation. But I think it's been made too easy for them, you know. And I kind of, in one way, I see it. So, you know, my parents experienced something. You know, let's just say a simple thing like they experienced a regular beating, which actually both of them didn't. But still, let's say that would be one thing, because that is one of those things, you know, in the earlier days, if you didn't do what dad said, you
got the belt.
Got the belt, you know. So then you think that really was not nice. I don't want to do that to my kid anymore. So you take that out of the equation, you know. So then you have to discipline your child still a little bit. So you maybe give it like some things I got from my mom were silence. I had a hard time dealing with silence.
Psychological abuse.
Yeah, psychological warfare. Yeah. But I really had to be a brat. And thinking back, every time I was a brat, you know, when I got that. Or I remember one time we would have these evenings when my dad go, for instance, to meet his friends for whatever, a beer or play bowling. We would have a nice dinner, my favorite food, and watch a movie I would like. And I remember that one time I wanted to walk dad to the car. Said like, hey, can I, you know, and he said like, yeah, sure, but just, you know, make sure you go home after. I didn't want to go home after. So he was all like getting stressed out, you know, because he couldn't catch me. So he ran back, told mom, hey, go get him. We ran around the block, and these were big blocks. That was probably, in the end, easily a kilometer. She had to chase me. So unfortunately, I run myself into, it was sort of underneath these houses. There was a way for the cars to go back, and there was a sort of a cul-de-sac type section of garages. So I ran myself into that little thing, and eventually that's where she got me.
Little dead end.
Yeah, that's where she got me. So I got a couple whackings on my rear, and then home. Favorite dinner was off the list, and I had to go to bed. I screamed so badly, my grandma came up from below because she thought my mom would strangle me or abuse me or so. It was just because I didn't get the food I wanted and I couldn't watch the movie I wanted. Had to go to bed. So then you think that was a horrible experience. I don't want to do that to my kid. So you're taking that out of the equation. So how do you have those kids respect you? What do you have in the end to discipline them with? What do you have?
Not much. So parents are so cluelessly easy on their kids now. We are raising, like, as if the generation that we are experiencing right now wasn't a big enough group of soft-handed, useless idiots. Now we have those people procreating.
Yeah.
And, oh no, we don't ever talk to Bobby like that. He's a creative genius and he runs our household and he's a little monster. Like, no thanks. We're not, and I mean, we've seen it in our friend group where it's like people start raising kids and then we don't hang out with them anymore.
Right.
Because of exactly what you've just pointed out. Yeah. This kid's just running around with a sword, cutting other kids' heads off.
Yeah.
You're like, I can't have you near my daughters.
Yeah.
My daughters are well trained. I can't have them seeing how other kids act and think that it's okay.
It's okay, yeah.
Right? So no, we're not friends.
I think it's as I said, we never had a kid myself bringing up. I think it's a probably the most difficult job you ever have in your life. And what is right and what is wrong? Is there a right and is there wrong? Or is there just like there is a way this way or there's a way that way? Like there is the hard way, there is the soft way. I'm thinking, I remember one time in school, we had a snowball fight, and after our intermission was open, one of the teachers who oversaw the intermission called me up and said, like, you threw a snowball into that window. And I had honestly no idea I did throw a snowball.
right.
So it maybe was just an accidental, like I missed my body and hit the window. It was not a purposeful thing, and I had no awareness of it. So I said, like, no, I didn't. Bang! I got one right in the face. And I was like shocked, Did it turn me into a weirdo, or did I feel abused? No, I was mad because like that guy just hit me for really, I didn't think I did it, So I think, I don't know, just let them run, or even support them with everything. Another thing which that actually I encountered very soon when I was here in Canada with people around us who had children. Everything they did was so encouraged in a way that, like, let's say one will play an instrument and it played that instrument for a while already, but it simply sucked at it. And they would tell them how good it was at it.
Right.
And I think that's just wrong. Because then the poor boy or the poor girl goes out there with his whatever he plays and thinks like, I'm that great guitar player.
Mom says I'm great.
Yeah, I'm great. And it goes to have a school concert. He says, I'm going to play the guitar. And it is up there and it plays the guitar and it is just bad. I think you have to be honest enough with your children to tell them when they're not good at something. Yes, don't tell them you suck, but make it so that they either work harder on it, or that they might, maybe they're like, okay, yeah, maybe I'm not that good at it.
This is not for you. This is not for you. Your high value work.
Find something else.
Yeah.
Find something else. Like, I don't know. Yeah, it's
So okay, so you bring up an interesting you bring up an interesting point about how we live in a meritocracy socially, right? That example that you just brought up, it's like if you suck, your friends are going to let you know. Right now in school. Well, at least where I went to school, in the time that I went to school.
Oh yeah.
If I showed up and played the guitar and I sucked, I'd know about it immediately.
Yeah.
But now we're just going to protect people from their competencies and their merits, and just everybody's good. Everybody's a great guitar player. Not.
No.
Right? And so are we setting kids up for failure? Absolutely.
Exactly. I think it's you just have to be careful with that.
Yes.
You just have to be careful with that. And I've seen it many times, and I'm like I'm thinking like, well, are you sure? Like, doesn't look that great or doesn't sound that great or whatever, are you sure? Of course you think your kid is great, and you should think your kid is great.
Yes.
But be realistic.
Be realistic. One of the things
things
that I say about parenting, and I'm very old school with the parenting thing.
Right at the beginning.
My daughters have a very strict training program that they're on because I want them to be assassins later in life. I want them to be able to walk into a room, see the threats, not be naive, know what their strengths are, and execute in every situation, business, work, whatever you're personal. And so I have this philosophy whereby kids are going to spend more time as adults in their life than children. Let's give them a nice childhood that's buttressed with a lot of reality. And just exactly as you point out, like let's not shelter our children from reality.
No, it's the dumbest thing you can do.
It's the dumbest thing you can do.
Because they, there's a reason why they call those moms, helicopter moms?
Yeah.
What's the worst now? I think there is one step up now. Can't remember what it was, but it's...
Yeah.
When I talk with Eileen about it, she says that whole thing, a lot of that started when, what was that guy's name? That he was a mass murderer on the island, I think he
Bundy?
was. I can't remember. And he took, I don't know how many children. So that was a big reason why a lot of that...
Yeah, I could see that.
I can understand that,
Protect our kids. There's fucking serial killers out there.
Yeah, I can kind of see that and what you do about that. But it eventually... we had perverts running around every once in a while. There was an alert, there's some guy running around. And I remember one time we just went up into the woods, one of our favorite trails. We were like 3 or 4, probably somewhere between, I don't know, 8 to 12 years old, somewhere in that range, I would say.
Yeah.
And this guy comes against us on that little wood trail. People wouldn't go for a walk on that little wood trail because it was like, about that wide and shitty to walk on. But for us, it was great. So he came and he had one arm in his jacket like he had a sling. That's what it looked like. But we didn't know what it was. We saw that guy and we bolted it like the devil was behind us.
Yes.
We just saw him like literally. It was a matter of seconds. He came and he was like, hey, I don't know what he said. Never heard what he said. He said something, had his hand out, and we just ran. And that was that.
Yeah.
And then 2 days later, we go back into the woods, So
that's a different time, isn't it?
it is, and you were, I remember in school, we once were like made aware by the teacher, say like, look, there is a man around and he's trying to ask children for whatever, I can't remember. So don't react to anybody, go home straight, and that's what we did. We went home, we didn't play around after school anymore because you always had, like in Switzerland, you always had like the morning, then you had lunch break, which you would go home, and then you had the afternoon. If you had afternoon, then you come back. And that was the other thing, which I think is one of these, and it's a little bit different in Canada because we do have wildlife here, but I had to walk through a bunch of woodlands to get to my school. I had about it was easily half an hour walk to school, uphill, going home, downhill. It always took me twice as long going home because you had fun on the way home. You played with your buddies going home on the way going there. You didn't really run into your buddies, maybe then you walked together. But we went through the woodlands. We sometimes purposely went off the actual regular path and went through the woodlands and did that, But I think we just had that awareness. If somebody is a stranger, just boot it. And they want something from you, just boot it.
Yeah.
I don't know if that is the same these days or if kids have gotten more trusting.
How big of a family?
Come.
How big of a family do you come from?
It was just me.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
and typically, how big were the families in that era of?
I had everything from 10 to 1.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
So
that was my friends. Was like
I often question, how you're talking about bringing your kids in like this, as a result of a serial killer or a pervert in the woods or whatever. I've often thought that because we're having less kids as a country, they're more dear
more
to
protective.
us now, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
I look at just my dad's family. They had 7 freaking kids.
Yeah.
Right. Versus our family, we have 2.
Yeah.
Right. Or the family that we came from for 4.
Yeah.
7, 4, 2.
Yeah.
You're like, is that potentially a suspect in this over-parenting detail that we have less kids and they're more dear to it? I don't know. It's just a thought, right?
Well, maybe. I don't know. I really can't say.
Yeah.
I think it is also like character because I think there is a lot of parents out there when you see some of the kids which they seem to not care too much. That's the other side. Then you find there is probably more parents out there these days than there used to be who quite honestly shouldn't have kids.
Shouldn't be parents.
Yeah, shouldn't
Yes.
be parents.
I think you're right. I had a really dysfunctional upbringing. My dad was one of those people that he was a drug addict. Excuse me. And there was a period of his life where he was sober. And when I was young, from 5 till about 12, I think, it was about probably 7 good years there. But other than that, he was one of those people that just should not have been a parent.
Yeah.
Because they just didn't have that lay your life down for your family into him. Like, your life is no longer yours. Your life is now a part of this group,
Yeah.
and couldn't serve his wife, couldn't serve his kids, couldn't take care of himself. And I think there is a lot more of that in our communities than you think. I just think that there's a lot
it could
of
easily be. I don't know. It yeah, it's just sometimes for the job I'm doing now, when I go into houses and I see how they live in there, which I generally, a lot of times I don't meet the people, but you just see how they live. And I always think, like, if you have to grow up in something like that, that probably does something to you over time. And that is sad. And I think even if you do not have much money, you can still live respectfully.
with dignity.
With dignity. Yeah, exactly. And some it's definitely not the case, unfortunately.
Thomas, that is the second time I've heard that in as many days. I had breakfast with a realtor friend of mine yesterday and his beautiful family and wife in a new house that he just built for them. And he said the same thing.
Okay.
He said some of the residents that he has to show,
Yeah.
and he goes into these places and there's like kid toys and he's like, there are children living here
Yeah.
in this environment.
Yeah. It's very
How depressing.
Yeah, it's very sad. And I'm sure, I still believe in the end it is, or your future will depend on what kind of character you are as a child, or as a person. I know a friend of mine, she grew up in probably the worst case scenario in a native family, First Nations, I should say.
Whatever you like.
With rape and murder and everything.
Yeah.
And when she was 14 years old, she booted, she had it, she ran away. And she's a very sensitive person, but she lives a perfectly normal and quite successful life now. So I think you still, no matter how you grow up, if you have the right personality, you can still get out of it. You can still create a good life for yourself. But you have to you have to be able to be mindful enough to recognize what's going on and then make the changes accordingly. And I know it's easy said for me because I had a pretty good upbringing, but I think you can. I think you can. And she basically proves. And it's not just her. I mean, look at all, or not all, but look at some of the, let's say, NBA players. I think a lot of them come out of
The ghetto.
And that is they have basketball. That is my way out, So they go for it hard and they make it. They're talented enough, they're tall enough, and they make it. So I think if you're driven, if you really want to, I think you can.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. So, and I've heard this before said, the golden age of media that we're in right now, it's like adversity is a prerequisite to success. And essentially that's what we're saying, right? Adversity coupled with hard work and dedication, those are the prerequisites to a successful, beautiful life. That's worth sharing, at least. Let's go through, Thomas. I want to exit Switzerland.
Okay.
Let's enter Canada. How old were you when you arrived in Canada? And tell me a bit about how that adventure unfolded for you here in Canada.
What was that? 32. Is that correct? 63 to 95. Yeah, that's 32. So I was 32. It was 4 of us, my former wife and our best friends. And we stuck all our money together and bought a little motel up north. Well, it's not really that much up north. We thought it was up north. So 3 hours west of Williams Lake.
Okay.
Little village called Nimpo Lake. Not much left of it these days, I believe. At least the downtown core, which was a store, our motel, a restaurant, and a garage. And then another building which was vacant at the time. So we bought that little motel up there and ran it.
You bought it in the 90s?
We bought it in 95, yeah. Well, but yeah, we bought it in 95. We moved into the country in November 95. And
What was, so just maybe we can back up a bit.
Yeah.
So you and this other couple and your wife, you guys had some savings
yeah,
that you had banked up from working in Switzerland or in Europe?
yeah. Yeah, it's like, and you also, when you leave, like in Switzerland, everything is very well organized in ways of your retirement. So you have a government controlled retirement fund, and then you have a company controlled retirement fund, which
Public and private sector.
yeah, public and
retirement
private
funds
sector.
managed.
And when you leave the country, that private sector money you get back. So we all got that money back. And in Switzerland, you pay quite a bit into that. And well, depends on the company actually. And then your company has to match that or more if they want. I was lucky enough because I was working in a big company for most of the time I was in Switzerland. They paid twice as much
Wow.
than I had to. So that was quite a bit of money. And then, each our parents helped a little bit.
That's nice.
Yeah. So that's how we were able. First, we were all like, oh, we want a resort, tourism. That was our idea. How do we get in? Tourism is a good thing in Canada because it didn't look like any of our jobs were of much interest, which was actually not true in the end. That was how we got in. But still, don't try and be employed somewhere. You have to stay independent. That was our idea. But
Not be employed somewhere, be a visionary entrepreneur.
well, exactly. Yeah,
Yes.
that was our idea. We got some hints along the way what we really should do, and that's kind of what we did, and it worked out really well. So we had that motel, and that was a very interesting time too, because you learn a lot about people when you run a place like that.
Seeing a lot of people come in.
You've seen a lot of people go in.
And was it like transient people or like people that are passing through, or were you supporting an industry like logging?
We had both.
Okay.
We had just people who passed through. Now, since we were in Impo Lake, which is on Highway 20, which ends you up down in Bella Coola, so we would get the odd passer through, particularly in summer, of course, because it's a pretty drive. But most of it was trades, or even, they had the commercial, what do you call these guys who they check trucks and stuff?
Commercial inspection?
Yeah, commercial inspection. So they would come out and see that the logging trucks were not filled too high and stuff like that, So they would stay with us, and the guy who has to fix something at the mill would stay with us. Sometimes there was a it wasn't a hospital, but it was a medical station out there. So they didn't have accommodations for their staff when they needed more, so they would stay with us and stuff like that.
My wife used to work up in that exact area just south of Quesnel.
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
And she was a medic.
Okay.
So she
Yeah.
lived in a motel,
Yeah.
exactly as you're describing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was cute little 14 room, like 12 rooms and 2 kitchenettes, and then had a little living quarter on the side. And it was a interesting experience. Like, we had everything from people you did not even know they slept in their room, they were that clean, to should we just rip everything out and rebuild it?
Oh, wow.
Oh yeah, bad. Like, not that furniture was badly damaged, but just smells and just gross.
Gross.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you learned a lot about people.
You do. Yeah.
running a motel.
Yeah, you do. Majority good. Some very, very, very good. You kind of just want to have them move in and stay there,
Yeah.
And then you have these odd, unfortunate incidences,
Mm-hmm.
And I kicked people out. They were just not.
Not a right fit for the establishment.
Yeah. And we were not a fancy place by any means. We were our average motel, We were trying to make it look a little more, gave each room a little bit of a theme with photographs. And then I started doing the woodwork. So we made some things, and that's actually how it got going with my woodworking career.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you went from being motel, Pure Air, you're running this establishment, start dressing out the rooms,
Yeah.
the furniture.
Yeah. So I had the furniture, we made some patio furniture, and then some of the neighbors saw it and was like, hey, can you make me one of those? Sure, I can.
Yeah.
And that's how that started.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how did that evolve?
So the first pieces were, part of it was new lumber, 2x4s and 2x6s. And the other part was recycled or reclaimed lumber. So first we had that massive pile, I don't know where it came from, we had that massive pile of anything between 1x4 and 1x6s in the back laying there. It was all nicely weathered. And the mill had that chain from their manufactory into one of those big cone ovens, where all the 2x4s which went too crooked in the process, they chopped up into, let's say, 2-foot pieces, and they went onto the chain and into the oven. So I backed up to that chain and chop. I also made good firewood, know. So I kept all the longer, straight, nice pieces, and the rest went into the oven, in our oven. And so that was kind of like the frame was out of 2x4s, and then the seating or the tabletop then was the recycled lumber. And then from there, it started to get a little fancier in ways of trying to build a cabinet in the same way. And then I started incorporating metal as the structural parts. And because I did it then, and some people started buying it, they also knew that I was looking for it, So it's like, hey,
we're taking down an old building.
Yeah,
come
exactly.
Get it.
Come get it. I remember driving down the road with like the most beautiful 2x6 tongue and groove cedar boards I ripped out of a roof, And stuff like that. Or, hey, we have this really old fence. Do you want it? So I go look at the fence thinking, yeah, maybe it's not too bad. So I'll take it. I take the fence down, nice 2x8s, Then you go home, you start stripping the paint. It's all beautiful cedar underneath it.
Wow.
Stuff like that.
Like first cut.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Beautiful material.
Yeah, when they still had big cedar trees.
Yes.
And then we met a guy down in Bella Coola, and he had an old cannery factory and property out in the fjord. So you actually had to take the boat to go out there.
Yes.
And the way it was situated, every once in a while when they were still logging, they didn't log. They stopped actually logging soon after you arrived down there. If a log would break loose or so, it ended up on his shore, just from the way the currents were, Yeah. So he got himself a little mill, and he milled some of those up. So I got some pretty substantial slabs then from him at certain points when I had a project. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, and found some in the old yard. You go around and you ask, hey, what's with that? Well, just take it. Like some boards, like they were like that, with the natural edge still, and 3 inches thick, So I started making really chunky, hefty furniture out of those. And I then thought, oh no, how did I go? They had an exhibition. In Williams Lake. There was a little gallery in Williams Lake, and they had an exhibition, and I somehow knew about that. And they were looking for local, which was 300 kilometers, but that's still local.
Yes,
up there.
Up there, yeah.
Yeah, for local artists and craftsmen. So I made 2 log chairs. I made a rocking chair, which the first part of the one side of the rocking I found really fast, was a nice log at a perfect bend. The second, I think it took me 2 weeks roaming through the woods till I found something close enough that I did not have to, work too hard to get it, that it doesn't look like a piece of log anymore. But I found one. I just had to adjust it a little bit. And then I bought some really fancy looking fabric and put some upholstery on it. So it was like a upholstered log chair or a rocker, both. And then a woman, which opened a gallery in 100 Mile House, saw them and contacted me and said, hey, we're opening this gallery and on a constant base, not just on a this exhibition base.
Yeah.
Do you want to bring some stuff down? I said, like, sure. So I made more stuff and brought it down there.
Yeah.
The woman they hired to run that gallery then opened, or not she, but then I don't know, you probably remember that, the BC Wood Co-op. Have you ever heard of that one?
No.
So it was a gallery they opened up on Granville Island.
Okay.
Right in the center of Granville
Yes.
Island, like opposite of the market and the sandbar. There was a nice little facility. They opened that. And she went from 100 Mile House down to Vancouver because she had some art degrees and so was quite knowledgeable, and opened that and said, hey, Thomas, we need stuff, Wow. It was right at the beginning. So I was one of the first artists in there. So, and that's how it started. There was like more small stuff down there. Lamps. I made a lot of lamps. Like
Really?
You find some twirly art looking piece of wood and you clean it nicely up, drill a hole through it, put a piece of metal rod, a hollow metal rod on top of it, and you can get all the electrical parts at Canadian Tire, find a nice lampshade at IKEA, and there is your lamp, They were pretty easy. Or another thing which sold really well was bookends.
Just random pieces of beautiful wood.
What I did was, that was when we lived already down here. I was able to get into Peerless at the time and roam through their garbage, like metal scraps. Mm-hmm. And they had these perfect oval cutouts, a little heavier, and I sliced them in half, put a little round 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch piece of metal up, and then up in Nimpo Lake, I had found all these beaver-chewed poplar trees.
Yes.
And I cut them in half, obviously with the beaver chew part on top of it, and cleaned them nicely up and really made the inside really nice looking. And they changed and, nice from the bright wood down to the really dark wood, very nice looking. So they sold I don't know how many I sold of those.
Wow.
Yeah. And then within that time, I just got more and more clients up there, and then we moved down here part-time, because it took a while to sell that motel. Nobody wanted to live up there.
Really?
Yeah. It's actually interesting. We got a lot of interest when we had it listed from East Indians out of the Lower Mainland.
Yeah.
As soon as they knew where it was. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you.
No, not up there. Eventually, we sold it to a local. But anyway, we moved down here, so I had to start to reestablish myself again, which I was lucky enough. It was not just all me; it was also luck.
Yes.
That I knew the people which used to own Red Rooster down here, and they had the odd little job here and there, and then stuff gets out. As soon as people see things, Mm-hmm. And what I told you earlier it was that beginning. Nobody around here, or sometimes even on a broader scale, when I went to Vancouver into furniture stores or galleries, had that rough metal and recycled wood combination yet, Mm-hmm. So that was unique, and people was, oh, this looks really nice, and it was also cheap.
Yeah.
So I could keep my overhead down.
So your overhead was low. Your material costs were next to nothing if you were scrounging materials where you could.
Yeah.
What did you have for a facility at the time?
At the time when we moved down here, I had a little area in the house I could work.
Yeah.
It was not ideal. It had a low ceiling, and it was probably...
This is 17 feet.
Yeah.
Here.
It was, the white part was like that, and then it sort of narrowed down. So it was maybe 17, and then, let me say 17, 18 by 18, but it had a jog out from another room there,
Yeah.
So I could set my table saw up on a steady base, but everything else was on wheels. I wheeled it around. And because I integrated metal, the welding happened outside under one of these little put-up fold up tents kind of thing.
They don't hold much snow, do
No, they don't.
those
No,
tents?
no. It
You
wasn't,
probably went through a few of those.
well, I was just winter and welding was just not going together. It was just in the better times of the year, like weather-wise. And it just went on from there. And then unfortunately, eventually, after 2003, we split up, and I actually had to find myself a workshop. And I found a workshop in town which didn't break the bank. And then I was in there a little bit over a year, I believe, and I was approached by what was at the time Canyon Creek Timbers. And they just had hooked up with Ritchie Construction to build fancier houses, these post and beam houses, and they needed a lot of metalwork for those. So I can't remember how he found me. Anyway, somehow he found me, and I moved in with him and did all the metalwork and some of the woodwork then for them. So the furniture slowly disappeared and turned into metal detail work for houses, and even like smaller post and beam structures, like an entryway or things like that.
Yeah.
And that went on for a few years.
You worked with Ted?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many years did you work with
Ted
him?
Ritchie? That was, I would say, just my first number coming to my mind is 4.
Yeah.
And then I had, at the time, I had I could say a cabin in Naramata. It was the old station chief's cabin from the railway at the time.
Oh,
so
wow.
it was built in 1910, and that was what it looked like when I bought it. It was not,
Just straight out of
it
a
was
time
not
capsule?
too. It was okay shape, except if you looked underneath it.
Was it sitting on a couple pieces of slate?
No, it was not even slate. It was wood, and some of it was rotten.
Yeah.
And the guy who owned it did some weird things to it. So I worked on that one and made it a little bit funkier and stuff. But every morning I walked my dog down the cave yard, and I watched that really weird thing going up down an Arowana place. So it was about 200 meters distance, air distance, straight distance. So I couldn't really determine what it was. Just saw like sticks out of the ground, and it was like, what do they do down there, Eventually the whole thing turned into a house, which then turns out was Florian Mauer's house. Mm-hmm. And I went down there because I really liked that house. And we became friends.
Florian.
Yeah, they showed me the house. He was not home. Erica, his wife, was home, and I said, like, hey, I'm really sorry that I'm just marching in like that on you, but can I see your house? And she said, oh yeah, come on in, I show you. So she showed me, and we became friends. They invited me over for dinner, and we talked about building and stuff, and I told them what I do and, him, and he struggled with his designs because he was just too far ahead for down here.
So the house that you're describing is the Mauer house.
It's the Mauer house.
Won the
Several good awards with it.
Yes,
Yeah.
the Lieutenant Governor Award,
Yeah.
like the highest architectural award you can win in the country.
Yeah, amongst a whole bunch of other ones.
Yes.
From Canada and the States. So we stayed friends for a while, and then that was before. So while he was still on his own, he got a job from one of his neighbors to redo their landscape with some structures, some outdoor structures, like some pergolas, some covered with roof, some just covered with shade, like wood slats. And he said, do you want to do the metal and woodwork for it? And I said, like, yeah, sure. So we started working together. And then eventually he hooked up with Chris Allen, which now runs Landform Architecture, former Allen and Mauer Architecture. And they had a project together to build a little bit of bigger and nicer garage for somebody. And the contractor they chose just pretty much like changed the design around to what he think it should be.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, kind of like, yeah, that is how we done it here. You know, that's how we do it, not how we done it, that's how we do it. So I changed that. Florian was in complete panic over it. And he said, we can never trust anybody with building a house of ours if that is going to happen to it, you know. So he said, we have to create our own design build company and have control over this. So that's what we did. And then my job became, meanwhile, I had left Canyon Creek Timbers.
Yes.
And my job was that I have like run the design build part of it, like be basically the project manager on site, you know, and build along with it.
Yeah.
So that's what we did. And it took a little while, and then we got our first house. And from then on, it just sort of kept going. And eventually it was, for me, too much pressure, just in ways of I liked my more independent part I had before when I was just on my own, where I could more or less go and come and go as I pleased, you know, if I wanted to take a week off or so.
Yeah.
So that was more restrained. I was also in the building part of my own place. So I had a massive time gap there, which I could not work on my house, which was not an advantage. I did not like that, but there was just too much work
Yes.
in the company.
And that's when we met, was
Exactly.
when you were building that,
Yes.
that really cool house
Yeah.
up
Yeah.
Madison?
Matheson Road, yeah.
Yeah.
And I needed a talented tiler.
Oh, that was, yeah, well, you made the right call on that one. Yeah, that was a long time ago.
Yeah, that was a long
When was
time
that,
ago.
2009?
Yeah, something like that.
2008,
2000, yeah,
2009?
yeah, somewhere there. That sounds about right. Yeah, yeah. So then I left.
That was a really cool house.
That was. It still is. Well, I don't know if it still is, because they've started doing some. I think they wanted to build an addition on it, and they also did some unfortunate things to the property. But that is just a matter of, you have in your little write-up on that email you sent me, what can we do to make things beautiful? So beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah.
So what I determine beautiful is not necessarily what is beautiful to somebody else. And then sometimes practicality is, of course, also
Of course.
a different.
They have kids, or if they have a
access, anything,
an injured family member that lives there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the house, just for our listeners, like, you built what looked, by the approach, just two opposing large rectilinear boxes.
Yeah, pretty much.
One that spanned out with a kitchen, living room, dining room area in it, and then one that spanned up with the bedroom volumes.
Yeah.
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 It was a really cool building.
Yeah. And the one actually, the one going horizontal actually was designed like a suspension bridge. So the posts were just the posts of the bridge, and everything else was, when you extend that post, was pretty much structurally hanging.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So you and Florian were working together on the design?
Yes, and I butchered it a little bit because as I experienced weather conditions down there, I just had to make some changes to it.
Insofar as wind loading?
Not necessarily wind load, but comfort. Comfort. So initially, like, people who know Florian know that he likes to separate the house into different buildings, So the tower part, which had the bedrooms, and the living part were separated by a breezeway. Now, if the wind comes from the south, it just hammers through that, or would have hammered through that breezeway. So I closed that in. And then we also had a rounded metal roof on it. So I had, first of all, trouble finding somebody who can make that shape into on a square tube. And then I tried on a smaller scale to bend the roof, which would be corrugated metal, over that structure. And I was able to do it. But the problem was, because this would have been quite long sheets.
Yes.
And the problem was, as you bend them down, that they're not going out of whack.
Yes.
And holding them then that down under that pressure.
Oh, and yeah. So then, that's really great. We got the sheet down into place. Okay, 2 years later, what's happening? Oh, all the screws are popping out.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
Because we had a freeze thaw cycle followed by a bunch of heat.
Yeah.
Boom.
And also you had to build the roof inside out. Mm-hmm. So you have to start with the inside. So that is not a very practical thing if weather changes or
from a maintenance perspective.
Yeah, from a maintenance. So it's very tricky, because I had, like, it looked from the inside, it would have looked all awesome. You have those metal structural parts, and then I had like 2x4 tongue and groove, which would have gone over it. It would have looked amazing from the inside, you know. But have those exposed for a while? No. So I changed that around, and I had more glue lamps left, which they were all recycled.
Yes.
I did not buy one glue lamp new. They were all recycled. Some had cost me money, some hadn't. And so I had lots of them left. So I made it just like a regular shallow vaulted roof, which still looked cool in the end. It was just drywalled, but you still saw the beams. Mm-hmm. And I needed a collar tie, so there was a metal rod as collar tie. So it still looked interesting, but it was much easier to build. Much easier.
The cantilevered detail of your great room kitchen area was really unexpected. When you're a kid growing up in a very architecturally dull community like our community is, to roll up to this project. And I'm not even really sure how you and I met. Like, I don't know how I got to be tile setting that shower. Like, how the hell did that happen?
I think I was just Googling. I was just Googling
that might have been
Tyler, and I saw yours, and you looked as if you had projects which were a little bit different. You were not the regular, and you were a young guy. I thought, like, that's cool.
Yeah, because I remember showing up to site and just being like, wow, this is a really different way to express yourself from a building perspective. Because I was working for Richie at the time as well.
Okay, yeah.
Working with Ted, and I worked with him for about as long as well. Yeah. And that was right around when Nick bought the company.
Okay.
But we were doing very conservative buildings.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Like nothing edgy and hard lined and cantilevered like your building. So when I saw that was like a really neat introduction to edgy architecture. Who was the engineer? Who did you work with for engineering?
Kelly Davis. He did not even do all that much. He basically just had to verify. He just had to verify the
beam sizes.
The beam sizes and all that. And most of it was overkill anyway. Just the way it worked out from I bought this the majority of it was out of glue lamps, which were, I think they were 40 feet long. They were a 9 by 30.
That's a big beam.
They came out of an old gym.
Cool.
And they were laying in Canyon Creek Timber's yard at the time. They were owned by Plexus.
Yes.
But he could not use them because the first time he cut one apart, it had inconsistencies. So he could not use them. So I got them for, I think I paid him like $800 for 6 of them. That was not even, I calculated, that was not even lumber cost at the time.
That was a start the car moment.
Yeah.
Start the car.
Yeah, was a lot.
Put the beams on the truck.
Was a lot of resawing and planing. Thank God I had access to the Canyon Creek timber saw there. So Ross, the sawyer at the time, he resawed them all for me, and then I planed them all down. So that was a lot of work, and then, trail them up there, unload them all, and I had that, and I still have that stupid idea. I want to do as much by myself as possible.
Why is that a stupid idea? I know why it's a stupid idea. Explain.
if you're dealing with a 100-pound beam, it's not so easy, or even heavier. It's not so easier to maneuver them around. They're not the most maneuver friendly shape. They're long and heavy, so you kind of have to do a lot of thinking of like, okay, I'm going to set that up there, and then I can just like use leverage and stuff and move them around. And even building it, I was trying to do as much as possible myself, which at one point I had to give in.
Yeah.
I had to have help. I also built myself a fancy little crane. It was literally looking like a regular building crane, like the same sort of off balanced T-shape. And I had a little boat winch, manual one, which I ran through it, and that's how I built the whole house with it. Lifted all the beams up and everything what needed lifting, and I actually kept using that.
The site access on that site was I remember it being like a lot of rock. You had exposed places, and
you couldn't turn around.
Challenging.
You couldn't turn around. You had to back up at one point, particularly if you had a trailer.
Yeah.
You had to back up at one point, so it was easier to drive up and then back down than do it the opposite way around, unless you're really good doing it, which I wasn't. So it was interesting. It was cool. I really liked that I did it. It was a bit a case of coolness over practicalness. Like, it wasn't as practical.
No.
It also had a huge amount of glass, and I chose an electric in-floor heating, which the company who designed it made not a calculation error, but just what they told me goes where, made a mistake. So I had a stronger part of the heating system, they were a foot wide and came on a roll, like a polymer plastic kind of thing, which if it gets exposed to low voltage, it heats up.
Yes.
And so I put the weaker into the longhouse, which was the cooler house, because it was first of all the bigger space, and it had more glass than the tower. The tower was much easier to heat. So if it's really cold, you have issues,
Yeah.
And they also, because of that, they gave me the wrong transformers. So I could not even hook them all up. So I have some runs in there which are dead. They're not hooked up. So the people who bought it, I told them. And I don't know what they ever did. But if you have the wood stove, with the wood stove, it gets nice and cozy in there. It's perfectly fine,
Yeah.
But you have to have that wood stove there.
Undersizing of mechanical systems. I've heard this as a major problem. Like one of my best clients in town here, they did a geothermal system and completely undersized it.
Yeah.
And that's not something you want to screw up, get your calculations wrong.
Yes,
And so luckily he had all of the infrastructure in place to be able to put in a gas-fired boiler.
Okay.
Right. But, sometimes you get into situations where you don't have that infrastructure in place and you're screwed.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Houses not working properly.
Yeah.
Our environmental separators not working properly.
Yeah. Yeah. That sucks. But yeah, I could have, fixed it, but it worked for me. I also don't run my house very warm. No. Generally not. I don't see the point running around in my shorts in winter.
Yeah.
It was a cool place. And I remember the guy who came to empty the garbage cans. One day I ran into him and he said I always try to be a little early here that I can look up and check out your house.
Cool.
Yeah. That was pretty neat. And you wouldn't expect it from a guy like that, Not that I mean that in a negative way, but you think would he appreciate architecture? And then on the other hand, why not?
Yeah.
Why shouldn't he? But it was very, very surprising to me.
It was just a neat massing to look at. Mm-hmm. Very unexpected to see that massing.
Yeah. You know why the design happened? So my neighbor, which is also my realtor, he built a house, sort of. So you have that hillside going around, which is quite steep and
Yes.
rocky. It's a lot of rock, a lot of loose rock too. So when he built his house, he actually had to dig a berm to protect from rockfall.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, what's going to happen if I'm going for permit? Will they make me do that, So I thought like I'd be ahead of the game. I asked a geotech engineer to come out and have a look at it. So he came out and looked at it. And he said, yeah, like if the city wants to make you do something, I will certainly do that. We will have to put up some avalanche netting, like what you see on the highways and stuff.
Yes.
And he was talking about 15 feet high. And, depends how much house is exposed to the hillside. So I'm like, no effing way I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
That's going to cost a lot of money, So that's how the narrowness against the hillside came along. If something ever comes down, chances are less of a hit because it doesn't have that much surface to hit it.
Yeah.
And then thank God they did not even say anything about it. So I never had to do anything.
Well, that was back when you could potentially get away with something like that.
Yeah.
Now they have hillside development permits and
Right.
you're in, are you in a high hazard zone? Well, let me
Right.
look at the map. And you press a button, the high hazard zone comes up, whether or not you're in an actual hazard zone or not. If the polygon that your house is in happens to land on your property anywhere, now you're subject to a hillside development
really?
permit.
Okay.
And you got to bring in a geotech. And
Right.
so yeah, you snuck in before all the bureaucratic shit came in.
Yeah, they made me do some geotech, but more to hold the house in place.
Yes.
Kind of thing. Which that was no big deal there. That all went pretty well, and probably that was all also pretty much overkilled.
So during your tenure at Allen and Maurer, how many houses did you guys crank out?
Not many, because first of all, I don't like big crews. It's just you bother each other.
Yeah.
So I think the quality suffers. And also the control over the work is more difficult. You
Way
cannot
more
be
difficult.
everywhere and work at the same time on the house,
No, you can't.
So we did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5. I guess 6, including mine.
Yeah.
That I was involved.
And tight crews, just tight, small.
Yeah,
And as things got
small.
bigger, you
relatively
kind of
small crews. Yeah,
aborted.
yeah, relatively small crews. Well, yeah. Oh no, there's another one. There was one more. The Burker's house, one of the coolest actually. Well, they were all kind of cool, but that one was pretty cool. There were other ones on the go within the same time. I was just not involved. They actually started hooking up with Richie, and I think that worked quite well.
Yeah.
Which
Richie's still building houses with Chris.
think so. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, they are. I
Yeah.
know.
Okay.
I've seen some of the plans.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was about the amount, and I have to say, like, most of it went pretty well. I mean, obviously we had hiccups along the line, but we also never put ourselves into a time crunch. When you watch these home shows and they say like, we want to be done in 6 months, and I'm like,
That's not a real thing.
Yeah, nice. No,
That's not a real
you
thing.
You don't wanna stress a house build. You want to have it right.
I do know.
Yeah,
I know
you do
exactly what you're talking
I
about.
do know. Yeah, you do
Yeah.
know. I know. I mean, mine took way too long, but that was for different reasons.
Yeah.
But yeah, you want to leave time to do it correctly. And also like, things like I remember one time being up on the roof and shoveling the snow off so that I could finish it. I had to close it up. We just missed the weather kind of thing.
Yes.
And the roofer we had hired was one of those outfits coming in when everything was really busy, and he just came in and they decided to hire him that didn't go well.
Yeah.
So we had to finish it ourselves.
And you're up on this roof shoveling the snow off.
Yeah, and
to
then,
get it done.
and then finish the roof was just by myself.
Was that when you quit?
No, actually I was like, I always enjoyed problem solving, you know, and it was just the right thing to do. So I just did. It wasn't a huge amount, you know, it was a standing seam. So it just clicks in on its own. So I just had to have the first run right. And then it was relatively fast going down the line. But they didn't know what a straight line was. So flashing and stuff like
Straight
that.
line.
Yeah, straight line.
Right.
Straight line. And flashing. Really weird flashing. And I think we had some water issues in one they did entirely. And we had to redo some of it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyway, it's unfortunate.
Yeah. So what was the most prolific construction project that you were a part of in your construction career?
I think that was the Burkus house. And just from the effort needed to create the end result. So the house was, since it was a flooring house, it was 2 sections. It was a living, dining section, and it was a housing, like a bedroom section with a studio. And the living dining sections was entirely glass all the way around. So we had to build a metal structure, which was inside the glass, which was 4-inch round posts and had the odd crosses, metal crosses, to keep the whole thing from shaking.
Yes.
And then also the roof was SIPs, structurally insulated panels.
Yes.
And they were designed that the whole thing stops it from racking this way, you know. Mm-hmm. So everything had to be quite tight and accurate and stuff. And then the other part was dug into the hillside. And in the end, only 2 sides were visible. One a little bit, but it still was actually in the hillside. They just dug a little sort of outside corridor to those windows that there were still daylight in some of those. And then they covered it with a green roof.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. And that was kind of like, you know, whatever, normal. But the house was up from the road, I would say definitely 2 stories. And the garage was dug in on the bottom.
To the bedrock?
No, it was all clay.
Oh, did the clay?
Yeah, all clay, no bedrock. It was in Naramata.
Okay.
So all clay. We did not hit any bedrock anywhere, thank God.
Nice for digging.
Yeah, but it was a lot of digging. So that garage was underneath there, and then underground, a stair would go up into the glass house. And halfway up was where all the mechanical parts were in, like the heat pump and a little storage unit and stuff. So that was a massive hole.
Wow.
That was a huge hole. And they brought a lot of dirt away. Thank God there was a guy who wanted fill, like about a kilometer away. But I think who dug the hole at the time? It was Grizzly.
Okay.
I think, yeah, he said that was the biggest residential hole he ever dug at the time.
Wow.
Yeah, which I didn't like that much. I liked the end result, but I didn't like that much digging. It was because Florian always tried to have a small environmental footprint in ways of disturbing the ground. That was definitely, he probably made up right there for all the ones he did all right.
Yeah.
Just from a digging point, nothing was cut down or anything. It was just a grass hill, basically, between 2 orchard sections. But the end result was pretty cool.
So you drive into this bat cave.
Yeah.
Walk up these sets of stairs into this curtain wall assembly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And your lake view, I'm assuming.
Yes. Yeah. Not so much anymore because the property below sold now. So there is now a beautiful, I'm going to be bad, non-architecturally designed house.
A BC box.
Or at least a BC box kind of thing, yeah. So judgmental. But it is, you know what I think? It's like and now we're kind of getting finally a little bit onto that subject when you say, what is beautiful? Yeah, first of all, it's in the eye of the beholder. But then I find a lot of people probably don't have the courage to go a little bit outside the box. They do what everybody does. Maybe I'm wrong there.
No, you're right. You're absolutely
Maybe everybody likes just something simple.
Do you know what people like? Not getting sued. That's what they like. So they use products that have not only an incredible series of documents that come behind it, right, that have been tested in these CSA facilities. Oh, well, you can use that there, right? If you're going to be a pioneer and a trailblazer, especially in the BC build industry, especially where this industry is going from an energy efficiency perspective, durability perspective, all of that, you're taking a lot of risk.
Oh, interesting. I never even thought about that part.
Right.
I just always thought. I remember having when I was working for Canyon Creek, their interior designer, having a discussion with her, and we did a huge reno on a really big house above the lake on Lower Bench Road. And she said, yeah, you know what, then we have to do a little bit of this and a little bit of that, so it blends in with the rest of the houses in the neighborhood. And I said, like, what do you mean blends in?
Oh, God.
And she said, yeah, you know, so you kind of said, like, wouldn't it be more interesting if you stand out rather than blend in? And the discussion went only about 5 minutes because we immediately recognized that we had absolutely no common
ground.
Common ground, yeah, exactly. No common ground on the subject.
Yeah.
And having said that, do you ever watch the show Grand Design?
We love the show.
Have you seen one of the streets? They call it the streets.
Yes, how every house on the street is different.
Isn't that so refreshing?
It is very refreshing, yes.
Hugely refreshing. Imagine walking down a street and every house looks completely different.
Yeah.
You can, oh, look, I like that. I don't like that one. You know, you don't have to like it.
No.
But appreciate somebody having a vision and going for it. You know, I see houses, completely different houses I don't like, but I appreciate and commend that that person had a vision and went for it, despite everybody saying, oh, you know, you have to think resale. That's what my realtor did. He said, like, you have to think resale when you build. You sure you want to build it like that? You have to think resale, Thomas. You might not want to.
No, you want me to think resale so that you can do as little work as possible in order to sell this house. You know what I mean?
Who knows? It didn't take long, and I sold it. You know, there is the other thing then, because you have something special. There's people out there, they want something special, but they don't find a lot of special. Those people who bought the house said, like, every house we were looking at was gone by the time we got there, you know? So when they saw mine, they just like, boom, right on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you will always find a seller. I think where maybe it matters most or more is, like, you know, I shot a house not too long ago. It was like over 10,000 square feet. How do you sell something like that?
Oh, that's an albatross.
That is massive.
You are looking for such a rare client.
You need either somebody who likes the place, that size.
10,000
square
large.
It is designed so you can house 3 families independently in there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, kind of like one section for sure. The other one you probably have to do a little bit work to it. Like, the entries are not ideal, but you can.
Yeah,
you can. Has 2-3 kitchens.
So that's always been one of the things that we think about too from a building perspective. I think there is a sweet spot for building size. You know, you're like, let's disregard the build for resale comment.
Yes.
Come back to reality.
Yeah.
There is a size house that is easier to resell.
Oh, for sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Just from the money part of it too.
Yes,
you know?
Of course. And because a lot of the times, I mean, as you could probably agree with, people come in and they're like, okay, so we're going to buy this 10,000 square foot house and it was built in the 90s. We got to gut it. Think about the money that you have to spend in bathroom re and kitchen re and like.
Yeah, but it's not just that. It's like your taxes, your heating costs.
Right.
any maintenance cost, you know.
Yes.
The bigger it is, the more it's going to cost you. And here comes my little subject again. Today, I think we really have to think twice how big we build.
I agree.
Because resources are dwindling down. And yes, you know, we still have, I was actually curious, because I know probably at one point we're going to get to that point. So is how many trees are left in Canada? So I found rough, you know, I mean, obviously can't go out and count every tree, but the estimate was 2021. The estimate that it is about 318 billion trees which are left in Canada.
It's a lot.
That is a lot of trees. However, look at it from that way. That's how I look at things these days. And I'm just going to go short on that one. Do you know how much carbon a tree absorbs in a year, roughly? An average tree.
Is it a ton?
No, it's about 45 to 50 kilograms.
Okay.
Do you know how much carbon the average Canadian creates a year?
Just by breathing?
No, just by whatever.
Doing whatever?
Breathing, farting, driving around, going on holidays to Mexico,
Okay.
everything. 14 tons.
Right.
So if you do the math, that is a touch on the 300 trees for each Canadian to absorb that carbon. So if I did that math right, we're 200 trees short for each Canadian to absorb the carbon we create in our own country. Anyway, just that about, you know, trees and stuff. How did we get onto trees? Oh, material sources.
Yes, material resources, yeah.
So I think, you know, wood is considered a sustainable material, and I think it is sustainable if we use it and harvest it in a sustainable manner, which we do not. I think there's no way you cannot grow it as fast as you cut it down. You just cannot do that, you know. So I think we have to eventually really consider how we build. So if we build smaller, we need less wood, you know. I still think wood is a great material to build, but we just have to consider the size of it, you know.
Yeah.
If a retired couple, yes, you can say, yes, we're living in a free country, and we do. If I want to build as a retired person a 5,000 square foot home so that once a year I can host my family for Christmas in there with their 2 or 3 children, that is your free Canadian will. That is fine. But is it really responsible? I don't think it is anymore. I really do think it is not. Because those kids you house in that house maybe have to pay the price at one point in the not so far future for that thinking. And of course, a million different other things. But that part is one of it.
There are stages in life where, like for instance, right now, the building we're living in, I mean, I don't need to live in a house that's this big, right? We have kids running around, right? And we want to have another kid, right? And when we have our friends over, they all have lots of kids too, right? So you need a yard for them to play. You don't need a yard. You could go to the park or whatever, but it's nice.
Yeah.
It's a luxury,
Yeah.
right? And if you can build it yourself and afford it, then it makes sense,
Yeah.
right? I think that you bring up a great point that there are stages of life where you do need a bigger house. But for the most part,
yes. Yeah.
you don't.
Yeah.
In your 20s, you don't.
No.
Because you're never home.
Yep.
You're chasing girls or running around the woods.
Yes, yeah.
Right. And again, the point that you've just brought up, and when you're retired, you really don't.
No, you don't.
Right?
You don't.
Because you're not cohabitating with all these people,
No.
but maybe you are. And that brings up that other argument that they're talking about in BC legislature right now, where they're looking at solutions to solve this housing problem.
Yes.
And one of them is exactly as you've just proposed, densifying through the use
Yeah.
of smaller buildings.
Yeah.
Right? Where we are now allowing these carriage houses and accessory dwellings on every piece of land in the province, right? Which would potentially solve that problem. And I like thinking about this from an intergenerational land use perspective, whereby we raise our kids in this big house, right? And then they get to a certain age, we kick them out to the carriage house. They live in the small house for a little bit. Oh, isn't that really convenient? Oh, they meet a partner and they want to have kids. They move into the big house. We move into the small house.
Okay, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We're now a built-in daycare,
Yeah.
essentially,
Yes.
right? Because we're retired
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah.
They've taken over the family business
Yeah.
or whatever with their partner. And the maintenance, because it's a maintenance, owning something, there's maintenance.
Yeah.
Right? And this is the other thing that you're talking about. Why don't people build uniquely? because they want to have as low maintenance
as possible,
and as least interesting of an envelope as
Yeah.
possible.
Which
right?
I still think you can do that. Build uniquely and still be relatively low maintenance.
I agree. But just looking at that potential situation, and I would say that if I'm referencing your story, your grandma, did you say you were living in your grandma's house
Yeah.
in Switzerland?
Yeah.
So she lived in the basement?
No, it was a apartment building.
Okay.
It was a 5-story apartment building, and she lived in one, and we lived in one.
Right.
Yeah.
And you had your space.
Yeah.
And it was
But
segregated.
they were, I would say about 800 square foot, 2-bedroom apartments, and a living room and a kitchen and one bathroom.
Right.
Bathroom.
Right. So it was modest accommodation for daily life.
Yes.
It's interesting when Karen and I were in South America when we were kids, we were into the wine and stuff. We went into the wine growing region of Argentina, and we made friends with this little shop. We get poking around and find this little shop, and there's dust on the bottles, right? You're like, oh my God, this is amazing. And this young kid's behind the counter, and he's the son of the business owner.
Yeah.
And we immediately made friends, started buying wines from them, trying wines. And he says, you guys are great. Do you want to come over for dinner and play cards?
Oh, cool.
And we're like, yeah, sure. He's like, okay, great. Goes, locks the door, puts the closed sign up on the window, opens up the door from behind the counter.
Yes, yeah.
And now we're in a courtyard. We're like,
Oh,
what
yeah,
where the hell are we? And then we're in his house.
Yeah.
We're in this great, big, huge, beautiful courtyard with these trees peeling down. And then next thing you know, we're in mom's kitchen.
Yeah.
And so it was just really interesting to see that, like, his brother lived there.
Yeah.
Grandma was over in the corner. Intergenerational living.
Yeah.
Business attached.
Yeah.
Downtown Mendoza.
Yeah.
Right? You had this like live, work, interconnected program.
Yeah.
Which we don't really have a lot of that here.
No, I don't.
We don't.
So,
I remember when we were first looking at you're telling me the story about how you had to grow your business.
Yeah.
And you were working in small spaces. You can't swing a board around the room, right?
Yeah.
We were looking for the longest time of like, what's our next move, right? I'm renting a shop for however many $1,000 a month. My mortgage is however many $1,000 a month. Like, what do we do? There's no live, work, conducive zoning, right? Some of these municipalities have it. Like in Victoria, I think has a live, work. Maybe Vancouver does. But
Okay.
up here, you're like, what if I have a commercial idea that I'm building?
Yeah.
As a business?
Yeah.
Well, where can I do that? Well, you have to go to the industrial area.
Yeah.
Well, how well developed is the industrial area?
Yes.
Well, it's not very well developed.
Do I want to live there?
Exactly. And can I afford any of the buildings that are for rent?
Yeah.
You take a look at some of these square footage rents for commercial spaces.
Yeah.
How the fuck am I supposed to fire up a business idea in an environment that's not conducive to startups?
Yeah.
Right. And so I don't know. I think that in this country, we need to have more opportunity for what we've just described.
I think so. I definitely think. And you know what? That was one reason why we came here. Because Switzerland is very regulated.
Is it?
Very regulated.
From a land use perspective?
From any perspective. I once read a little report about Victor Inox, the makers of the Swiss Army knife. They're not just making the Swiss Army knife, they're making other stuff. During the year, they have 50 government inspections of all sorts.
Unbelievable.
And about half of them, I believe, or some shocking number, would be able to shut them down at any point if they see something they don't like.
Yeah.
Like even the guy who comes and inspects all the toilets, if there's something to his not liking, he can shut you down till you have it fixed it, which can cost you millions on a sized company like that,
Yes.
So that was one reason why we came to Canada, because we knew we have much more freedom to do so. And we had, and to a certain point still have. However, I do think we kind of work very well on losing that freedom because everything gets more and more regulated, which in one way I understand, because as population grows, you seem to need more regulations to kind of...
Do you think so?
I don't know, actually. Just as I'm saying it, I'm thinking, is it really so? Maybe not.
I mean, we live in one of the most affluent countries on the planet. Are we not able to self-regulate what it is? You know what I'm saying? It's like if I'm running a business and I want to be a good business person, what kind of image do we want to send out into the marketplace? Probably a clean one if we want to have repeat customers.
You think so? You think so?
Do we need somebody acting as that arbiter in our business?
I don't know.
It's not different in Canada, Thomas. Like, let me give you, for instance, with these window assemblies. So we're working with Florian's predecessor, or pardon me, is it predecessor? Before, after? No, we're working with Florian's apprentice, Austin Hawkins. I'm not sure if you know
Austin. Yes, of course I know Austin.
Right. So Austin is signing off on all of our door and window assemblies, right?
Yes.
Because otherwise we would need to open ourselves up to a non-governmental agency that would be able to do exactly what you just said they do in Switzerland, show up at our factory at any given time and walk through our manufacturing facility and go, oh, are you building that like that? Oh, well, it says in the drawing that, you've made a change to that? Oh, well, that's going to need to go back in for testing.
Right.
Oh, but we only just added a little tiny rebate around the sash. Like, why did... Oh, well, we don't know how that performs in the marketplace.
Yes.
So, and in the environment. So you're going to have to go back in for testing now. Right? And you're just like, aren't we... wait a second. We're supposed to be building more buildings for people because we have a housing crisis and all of our real estate's way overpriced. Well, I wonder why.
Right.
Because of all of these regulations that have pushed prices up and people out of the competitors out of the marketplace. And, I can remember when the BC government changed the door and window detail, and they said, they put out this bulletin back in 2018 or 17 saying all of the things that need to happen now with windows. They need to be certain energy efficiency, and you need to prove it through all these different methods and energy modeling and all of that stuff. And I asked my suppliers, I said, how many ma and pa window manufacturing companies did that legislation affect? He's like, are you kidding? What are you talking about? I mean, that shut most of them down. So you're looking at it from the perspective of like you're 55, 60 years old in the manufacturing game. This regulation comes down the pipe. You're like, are we going to tool up for this in order to be in business for that many more years?
Just going to close down.
Or are we just going to close down? Right? So you have like vast sectors of the building industry just shutting down.
And then on the same hand, where are the regulations for commercial buildings? I still see a lot of Allen block work, which is not the most efficient insulator. I don't know if they have to do stuff inside these days.
No, they don't. And I'll tell you what, that's the building that I used to own. That's the building I used to rent in town. And the amount of money that I would spend heating. My heater, Thomas, was running continuously in the wintertime. The heat was literally just blowing out of every facet of this building. But to your point, you look over and you're just like, well, shit, I mean, this is a small building. What about that building over there that's like got a 30-foot ceiling in it? Ripley's Manufacturing, which is right behind us, completely built out of tin. Is it insulated? Maybe.
Maybe.
I don't know. So to your point, how many cubic meters of natural gas go into heating a building like that every year?
I think the commercial ones are some of the worst. The ones I've seen anyway. Like I remember when I was sub-renting a Canyon Creek, that was just a
steel envelope.
Well, it was a cinder block wall.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, it was a cinder block wall. So
no insulation on either side of the assembly.
Nope.
Yeah.
No.
Minus 30, minus 25.
And the roof was massive glue lamps with a tongue and groove on top, and I'm not sure if there was any insulation on top of that tongue and groove, or if it was just a torch-on. I don't know. I think in the industrial section there could be quite some improvement made. And they actually, like when you listen to some of the reports come out, they actually say like, and also in apartment buildings and stuff, like it's just not, they're just not well built, a lot of them,
This is a really challenging climate to build to. I mean,
is.
2 weeks ago, we had minus 30 conditions up here.
I know.
And I had some friends that said it was even colder up at their place up
Oh,
in the
really?
valley. Yeah,
Yeah.
they said it was like minus 35 or something. And then the same thing, you're like, just 2 seasons ago, it was 50 degrees centigrade.
Yeah, I know.
You're like, you're building to like an 85 degree temperature swing.
Yeah.
That's an incredible demand.
And right now, I don't think they're really sure where they want to put the vapor barrier at this point. When I look at, when I see new construction,
Yes.
they started putting foil-faced rigid board on the outside of houses now. I'm not sure what they're doing on the inside. I'm not sure what the foil face on the outside really does. Nothing, probably, unless they just use it as the water barrier.
Water control, air control.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, well, that is a major problem, especially when you start building, like you have an assembly now, like with the BC step code, I'm not sure you're familiar with, but they're constantly ratcheting up the building standards to include higher R values in wall and ceiling assemblies, right? To improve efficiency of the buildings like we're discussing. This building that we're in right now was the first step 5 building built in the regional district.
Okay.
We have an air tightness on this building of 0.54, which is below passive house air tightness.
Okay.
So, but with that comes a lot of different challenges, right? You're talking about building science now, where you're placing the vapor barrier. Well, is it, on the outside of the framing? Is it on the inside of the framing like we've traditionally done it? If you have a wall that's that thick and it gets wet, can it dry? You just run into a whole bunch of different issues, right? And you're like, oh, you want to have air conditioning in the summertime?
I know. So you're reversing the whole thing.
You're reversing it now.
The whole thing.
And it brings it. This is a very challenging place to build.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yet, having said that, when I had my old cabin in Armada, 2x4 structure, shiplap on the inside, then a layer of drywall, a layer of shiplap on the outside, with a layer of tar paper, with a layer of other shiplap on top of it. I opened up a few spots on that wall and filled with shavings, wood shavings. I opened up a few locations on that wall to put newer or bigger windows in. Couldn't find a single piece of mold anywhere.
No.
The only spot where I found some mold was in the attic, which was 2x6 ceiling with a layer of tar paper between the studs, but it didn't reach them, so there was a gap. And then it was filled with a really fine wooden granular. And where the roof hit the wall, there was for about a foot, was a little bit of black mold every once in a while. That was the only spot I could find mold.
Because the moist, warm air was moving through the assembly. It then hit the cold roof deck and condensed.
Yeah, probably.
And then molded over time.
Yeah,
and as you say, 1910 construction.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So instead of living in a hermetically sealed box, you have a building that can completely breathe and dry in and out.
So it's I get the idea with keeping it as efficient from a point of using heating resources.
Yes.
So I get that. And so talking about grand design, I watched a very interesting one just a couple days ago. So this guy dug out a bunch of dirt, a lot of dirt, and built a completely uninsulated concrete structure. Then he dug it back in. The roof and 2 sides were completely dug back in. He insulated, I think, 20 meters away from the house.
Yes.
Thick styrofoam, he insulated everything. And then put insulation on top of the dirt on the roof as well, and put more dirt on and planted the roof green. Massive windows on sun-exposed sides. That's how he placed the house. And then he put probes everywhere. So he is an environmental kind of consultant kind of thing, how to build really efficient. And it was, I think, after a year of they lived in it, the house heated itself. They had no heating in there whatsoever. So the sun heats up the house. The heat in the house moves through the concrete into the dirt and stays there. And then in winter, it starts radiating back. And he also put and he didn't even at the time, he had not even started them up. He also had poured into the front of the house where all the windows would gather the sun, a sequence of like an in-floor heat.
Hydronic lines to grab
more, and
throw it
run
back
that
into
through
the assembly, so that's you're using it as a battery, a solar battery, essentially.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and it worked.
Yes.
It took time, but it worked. And he said, because it's radiant heat from everywhere, floor up, walls out, you can run, and I experienced that myself, you can run the house a few degrees lower than when you just blow a bunch of hot air into it. And that is true. That is absolutely true. I experienced that myself. So
every building that we build is hydronically heated for that reason. But yeah, you have to. It's the most intelligent way to heat something.
I totally agree.
Both this building, my shop, is completely hydronically heated.
Yeah.
Because blowing hot air, get out of here.
I know.
Come on.
I know. It's
barbaric.
I always say, like, take a glass, put hot water in it, stand it here or outside. Take a glass, put hot air in it, put a lid on it. What's going to be warmer longer? It's.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point. Yeah. People don't like to acknowledge the second law of thermodynamics for some reason. I don't know why.
I've never seen at the time in Switzerland a house with hot air heating.
They're all hydronic?
It was all hot water radiators.
Yes. Hydronic heating.
Yeah.
Amen.
And it's a much more comfortable heat to experience, There's a reason why people like fireplaces to sit in front of them and you have that radiant heat from the fire,
Yes.
So, but you have to sit over your little blowhole for the forced area to have a somewhat similar experience,
Yes. Huddled over it with a blanket over you.
Yeah. It's like, we have it in our house because it's an old house and there's no way you could refit it pretty much if you got the house completely. Do we want to do that? No, I don't have the intention to do that, and I probably cannot afford it as well.
Yeah, if you could find a contractor interested in doing that for you, you probably wouldn't want to buy it.
No. So anyway.
So from building, you transitioned now into your main business now, which is real estate photography for real estate agents.
That's right, yeah. So essentially, I got tired of building. That's just me. I just like changes every once in a while.
Yes.
And particularly with my last building job I had, which was David Ence's house. I don't know if you're familiar with the structure.
I am. I put a piece of furniture in that house and spent some time in that building. Richie Contracting built that.
Yeah.
Looks like a really modern spaceship landed right on the shore of Okanagan Lake.
Yeah, so
completely cladded in steel.
Yeah,
which you did.
I did that, which was extremely stressful.
Why was that?
It was stressful because it was raw steel plate with the scale on it, and then they put a semi-gloss automotive clear coat on it.
So it was like working with a Fabergé egg.
Pretty much.
Every single day you went to work.
Yeah.
You can't scratch it.
You cannot so much as look at it long enough. It has a scratch. It is that finicky. If you do that, you see it. You might not break the coat, but you leave a white mark on it. That finicky. I think we did pretty well for fact.
How did you attach that to the building so seamlessly? When you look at that building, it just looks like it's just completely armor cladded.
So
were there any visible fasteners? I can't remember.
Yes, they were.
Okay.
Yeah, they were. They just had them painted to a very similar color as the raw steel is.
It's a really beautiful application, Thomas. You did such a great job with that.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And the other thing is, like, I would have liked to see an actual gap, like a 3D gap, but it would have been way too much work and way too expensive. So we just went to a membrane, which basically is on a wooden screen underneath it,
Yes.
and then the sheets are pressed on it. Not that it will make it waterproof, but since it is a rain screen, it doesn't really matter that much if a little bit of water gets behind it. It will dry out again.
The more gaps in the assembly, the better. The more
Yeah.
opportunity for water to get in,
Yeah.
more opportunity for air to get in and dry it out.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. No, so that really kind of like, because at one point I was like, yeah, half construction, half photography, and I'd be happy about it. After that project, I was like, yeah, no more construction. that was it for me.
To be involved with something that was, I mean, so such a stunning project at the end.
Just
Very finicky.
Just the nerve wracking of it. I just did not want to have to deal with that anymore, and the whole logistics about it, and the physical aspect of it. It wasn't a dirty job; it was a clean job. But a lot of construction work is dirty, so I just got tired of the whole aspect of it. So the real estate photography was a good opportunity to start something new. Mm-hmm. And I think it helped that I did the construction before, because sometimes I can point things out. They're like, you should look at that. That doesn't look right to me. So thanks for mentioning it.
Real estate photography and home inspection services.
Yeah, well, just if something really catches my eye, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been good to me. It has gotten tougher over the last, I would say, 2 years, because all of a sudden, finally, competition has emerged.
Yes.
Because I was pretty much had no competition before. There was another couple photographers around, but because of some of the services I offered and they didn't, I had a kind of good go.
Yeah.
Now it's a little tougher, but it's still, there is enough business around, And I'm also slowly looking at having more time off than working. Mm-hmm. So the development is not a bad one in that matter. And sometimes I think, should I up the game? Should I, do whatever to like maybe get more clients again and so on? I'm thinking like, nah.
Yeah.
I'm happy how it is right now. I don't feel like putting the effort in anymore. I'm good.
So winding down? Is that what we're
Yeah, winding down. Spending more time on my mountain bike and less time behind the camera.
Running around in the forest. Where we started.
Exactly.
Where we started the conversation.
Exactly.
Like a savage in the forest.
Back into the forest.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it is rejuvenating. For me, extremely rejuvenating. So, forest, or last year I went down to Arizona for 3 weeks, took the bike.
Yeah.
And went on a little adventure. It was amazing.
Cool.
Biked in different areas. Desert, coastal, northern coastal. Was really cool. Yeah.
Touring, adventure.
Yeah. Road trip.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, was cool. Not very environmental friendly. A lot of driving. But
you don't have to be friendly all the time.
I know.
You're a really friendly person.
I know. But you know what? It's really like I stress myself about it.
What do you mean?
I don't know. Well, I kind of like, should I really do this? Should I drive? Like it was, ended up being about 8,000 kilometers I drove. Should I really drive that far? Just me and my bike? And then I'm thinking, well, I still have to live and enjoy my life a little bit. And if everybody today would say, okay, we're not driving anymore, I'd be certainly in with it. Or if half the people would say, or even less would say, don't do those kind of things anymore, I'd be with it.
Really?
I'd be with it. But if it's just...
So what okay, so then let's follow that to its conclusion. We do decide to do that. Does that mean that we have local manufacturing back and we have like cows downtown and we're making cheese over
No,
here?
I'm thinking
we have like wholesome European style communities.
That would be cool, of course. But I'm thinking more like the just simple, pure going for a joyride thing. You know, do I need to have a holiday in Mexico for a week because I'm sick of the winter? I can make it here without that. But yes, it is nice. It is pleasurable to get that week or 2 weeks of sun and warm and just we call it in Swiss a tapestry change.
A look away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yes, of course I like it, but I personally, for me, I have a bit of bad conscience about it.
So you've been conditioned by big media to feel as though the
No,
carbon,
I've always been, I've always been like that.
the carbon output of your life is something you need to feel regret for.
I just know about the carbon these days. But I've always like when I was little, I never threw anything away. All my garbage in my pockets back home.
Yeah, well, that's nice. That's called being a responsible citizen of your country.
Yeah.
Not throwing garbage out on
Yeah.
the street, not being a polluter.
Yeah.
Love that.
So
Wonderful.
my mom never had to teach me that. It just happened automatically to me,
Perfect.
you know.
What a kid.
Yeah. When my dad was running his car, I said like, hey, turn that off. I don't need to run, you know, it's stinky. That was for me like it was stinky. I didn't know it was bad. It was just stinky, you know. But I always had these little sort of ways of they were just with me kind of thing. So now it's just I know about what the issues are or what they think the issues are, I believe.
I would say that that's a product of you growing up in an affluent society, having that conscious awareness of your impact, right? I mean, imagine that you lived somewhere where getting food was very difficult. Living,
Yes.
heating yourself is
Yes.
very, like heating
Yes.
your body up was very difficult.
it's a
you
whole-
would not give
No.
a shit
No.
about any
Yeah,
of
I
those
agree.
things.
Yeah, I agree. It's down to survival. So you're looking at things completely different.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So we have the ability to be less impactful and cleaner and more conscientious of our environment when we live in an affluent society. Yes. So isn't that the argument for then making sure that more people have the type of experience that you and I have had? And one would argue that the best way to do that is to make clean, affordable energy available to more people.
Yes, of course.
Right.
Of course it is.
Yeah.
Of course it is. Yeah. Yeah. And you know what the funny thing is, so when we were talking about having this conversation, you know, when I thought maybe we will touch that subject because I was going to try and touch it.
Sure, you can. Go ahead, please.
I was
Hey, I gotta take a piss.
okay.
Before we get into that,
Don't cut that out.
hold that. Hold what you're gonna say.
Hold that thought. How long are we going now?
2.5 hours.
Oh my God. Holy moly.
Pretty much the average episode with that going on.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if you get into it, you know, if you keep the interest and the conversation going, if you don't run into a moment, and the subject is interesting in whatever we touched, you know.
Whereabouts are you living right now?
Near the college.
Okay.
Yeah, my partner's little house there. And we're gonna put a little addition on starting this year at one point with the whole permit thing and stuff. Because we just have a kitchen and then a living room. We don't really have a dining area. We always sort of squeeze into the kitchen.
Yeah.
And it's not the most practical. Like, you know, talking about space, it's like, I think the main floor is like just about 800 square feet, but it's like 2 bedrooms and a bathroom, and then that little kitchen with that living room. So we're gonna punch out the kitchen and then put a little rectangle with a new main entry. And then we can turn reno the kitchen completely because that is also not looking really good anymore. And it's not very practical. We'll make a whole nice new kitchen, turn the living room into dining area. I'm not a huge dining area fan. That's more her because I think it's one of the most underused spaces ever. So I would always, even in the house I built, I didn't really have a dining area. I had a space where you could, but we always ended up being, because I had a massively long counter, we always hanging on the counter and, you know.
Okay. Sorry, thank you for...
Oh, no worries. You have
David,
to...
let me know when you're ready to rock.
You have to give in to your natural callings.
I got to take care of the plumbing.
You do.
You know what I mean?
You don't want to get clogged up.
So you wanted to bring something up, something that you've been thinking about.
What was I? Gosh.
We were talking about carbon.
Yeah, we were talking about carbon and traveling, and that I feel bad about it. And yeah, I just feel we have to live more mindful about this these days, you know? Like, look at what the planet is. Like, I think most people agree if you drive into the Rockies or through the Swiss Alps or down on the ocean, we all love the beauty of that. And it kind of could go to shits.
How so?
If it gets warm enough, it's not going to be so beautiful anymore because for one thing, it'd be warmer, generally warmer. So the summers will be probably more extreme. Winters can be anything. We just seen that, you know. But some of the things which will happen when it gets warmer will influence what things will look like. So, for instance, glaciers. The glaciers, so they get snow in winter, it gets cold, they grow. Mm-hmm. And then in summer, they melt. So they keep all the little tributary creeks and rivers and so fed. If the glaciers are gone, eventually, you know, even if it snows still in winter,
yes,
the snow melts, and then at one point, the creek is dry. So we will, unless we come up with some really smart storage solution, and that's just for us, that's not for the woodlands around us, we will probably run into a water problem. So then food could become...
In some areas, you're
in some areas, yeah.
Where we do have glaciers that are acting in that capacity, yes.
And I mean, when you look at, you know, when you look at the Icefield Parkway and where these rivers go and what they feed and stuff, it's quite an intricate netting of streams, which eventually then, you know, go bigger and bigger and grow more and more and feed this and feed that and whatnot. And so I think that things like that will become an issue. They say that, I think the South Pole is already, it's not a solid mass anymore, it's moving. It used to be a solid ice shield, you know, which grew and shrank and grew and shrank, you know. So I think this is already, or at least huge parts of it, it's not that solid ice field. It's kind of more like an ice skin, which now goes with the waves. It moves, you know. So those, both sides, north and south, if that goes too far down, that will throw all kinds of other things out then again with warm and cold and ocean streams. And so I don't know, and I think some of it they may just can guess what happens because they've never lived it.
Like a modeling perspective.
A modeling perspective, they never lived it. They can get so much data out of core samplings of ice drillings and rock drillings and stuff and see what carbon levels were. They're pretty agreeing that all of the great mass extinction had something to do with carbon levels for whatever reason, how they happened, They actually, one thing I thought was very interesting, they could detect in the ice fields that when the Roman Empire was at its peak, that the carbon content in the air was higher. There was no other source of carbon very active at that time that they knew of or know of. So just because that empire grew so much, they needed a lot of trees. They built a lot of houses, more, burning fires, cutting trees down and stuff. So the carbon was slightly rising, and they can find that in the ice that carbon content was higher. And I thought that was extremely interesting. So, and the thing is also, like, we know about it, and we're just sitting on it. Everybody makes big words, but nobody really has done much actions, except little parts of the people have. Well, but it's mostly private. It's not like, I don't think any government has made any substantial steps to do it. So it was actually China. I just saw a thing the other day about China, which is the biggest polluter because of their coal-powered energy. They seem to have had some really issues with energy supply with their coal plants because they had some outages and stuff. So now they're freaking throwing in massive on solar and wind, like massive. So I'm thinking now some get it. They're trying to do the same in California, just on a smaller scale. Obviously, it takes time, and obviously this will create carbon till it's installed. Of course.
And as we've discussed with buildings, it's like, oh, it's great. You built a building. It's wonderful. Now you have to maintain it.
Yeah.
The whole time that it's alive as a building. Same as a solar array.
Yeah, of course.
Same as a wind turbine. It's like the constant maintenance, and that's constant maintenance as a best case scenario.
Yeah.
That's to say nothing of like a freak wind event or hail event or hurricane.
I know, which can damage things.
Now you're just like, we spent all of this capital, dedicated all of this land to this purpose, and something rolls through here and completely destroys everything that we've done in minutes, right? We had the same thing here in Summerland. Summerland just did this wonderful green project where we got all this government funding and we built a solar array.
Yeah, I saw it. Yeah,
did you see that joke of a project?
Yeah, I saw that.
Where they took perfectly good, the flattest, most developable land that we have, a piece of land that could have acted as an infrastructure bridge to the balance of the land behind it, which would have improved our ability to put housing up there, improved sewer infrastructure, water infrastructure, all of that, up the property values of everybody that lived there. But instead of building houses and mandating that the people that built the house put a solar array and maintain it on the roof, instead of doing something smart, they did something stupid and just built a solar array.
Do you know how much they can feed with that thing, actually?
Oh, probably like, I don't know, a couple cheeseburger stands. You know what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't, the amount of power is minuscule.
You know what the problem is? They've been sitting on it too long. Now the shit hit the fan over the last 2 years with all the weather and fire and floods and this. Yeah. Now they're thinking, oh, shoot, we probably should do something sometimes now, So I researched a little bit. The first time that greenhouse gases in a negative way were mentioned was around 1830, right at the beginning sort of the Industrial Revolution area, I think is that. Some smart guy, I can remember his name, did a little, I think he actually made a little something to create some smoke and stuff and in a little environment. And he said that eventually over time, this could affect our climate negatively if we keep going with this. That was around 1830. I joined a little webinar of David Suzuki a few days ago.
Uh-oh. Okay.
And he said that there was actually a newspaper thing he used, that in I think it was 1955, some of the researchers from oil companies made the statement that if they keep going like that, that will definitely negatively influence our climate, their own researchers. So it's been a long time coming that they have talked about it. At the beginning, it was probably more guessing or it's like,
yes,
this could happen kind of thing. Nobody's done anything. Nothing has happened. It seems that with humanity, the shit always has to hit the fan till something happens.
Mm-hmm. That's typically the way of anything, right?
It seems to be with us. It seems to be.
There's not a lot of prevention.
No.
There's just emergency response.
Yeah, it's emergency response. Now you see all these commercials about, oh, what does this guy do for the environment? Oh, what does that guy do for the environment? And then it's like the government of Canada is then the commercial, So now they're pushing But I mean, it's been around for a while now and nothing has done. And I think in the end, it really comes down to either ignorance, not believing it. For the single person, it's comfort. And that includes me at times. It's comfort, Could I walk to the store? Yeah, I could. But I also can take the truck. It only takes me like a minute versus walking for 10 minutes. And then it's, of course, financial greed.
Greed.
Yes. Not for the single person,
right?
But for the bigger companies. Imagine if 20 years ago, where the talk was already substantial about it, if the big oil companies would have some of that money they made invested in looking into alternative energies. Did they? I don't think so.
Well, I mean, I think BP has a lot. BP has spent a lot of money looking at transitional energy sources. Yeah. I mean, I don't know, have any exact figures in front of me. I don't have anybody to research that on the fly, but energy is energy. It's going to be for sale no matter what.
Yes,
no
exactly.
matter what it is.
Exactly.
Right? It's valuable in whatever form it comes in, right? It's nice that gasoline is so dense.
Of course, it's easy.
We can use it for powering jets and all sorts of crazy
That's the thing.
shit.
It's easy because we have the infrastructure and all that, so it's easy. Mm-hmm. So we maneuvered ourselves. It's kind of like a person who smokes and gets cancer and has to stop smoking. It's not going to be easy to stop smoking for most people.
Well, the issue with this is, if I go back to one of the comments that I made earlier, it's like, okay, so now are we living in, what do we want to say, pre-industrial European settlements, whereby we have a blacksmith, right? We have a carpenter, we have somebody that's into animal husbandry that takes care of the animals, and because everything comes on a truck, but that's not going to change. So we're going to have like a deindustrialized portion of our living experience, which would, now we're excluding like passenger vehicles and flights to Mexico, as you've discussed, but everything still comes on a truck. Okay, well, what's the benefit of that? Okay, what's the benefit of that if, as you've also pointed out, that we're shipping all of our coal to China and they're lighting it all on fire to produce electricity? What the hell difference?
I know.
What the hell difference is it going to make?
Nothing.
If you and I sacrifice all of this.
I know. That I totally agree on that. That is where government has failed badly, and I'm not just talking Canadian government. Any government has badly failed with proper policies to put that in place.
Well, we talked about this in our last interview, where it's like I said, I have a friend who lives in the Kootenays, works in a coal mine. The railroad is set up right there. They load this privately owned railroad.
Oh wow!
Privately owned.
Yeah.
Load this train up with coal, goes down to the Port of Vancouver, loads it into a giant ship, and goes to China.
Seriously?
Yeah, seriously. Tekimenko.
I didn't even
look it up.
That.
Absolutely.
The one The one thing I knew about was wood going to England for
burning.
For burning.
Yeah, for running a turbine.
And they just started that not too long ago, a few years ago, thinking it was a good idea.
Nuclear. I don't know what else I don't know what other word you would solve that problem.
You know
with.
what? If they, and I think I've heard, like I have a friend, which he used to work in a nuclear plant as an electrician, electro engineer, and he said like that. I think they're getting closer to cold fusion.
Tokamak.
Yeah.
We were just talking about
which
this.
Which would be quite a bit a different game then, I think. But what you said, and that's spooking around in my head, is like every single one of us has a roof. And we can put solar panels on it. We can have a little windmill going, between the two of them, you can probably run a house easily all year long.
Yeah.
Like here, and they get more and more sensitive, those solar panels, they get more and more sensitive, so they don't actually need direct sun. Of course, they're at peak at direct sun,
of course,
but they still create while it's cloudy, just not as much, but they get better and better. I actually just saw a little thing about, they're just small ones for little hand devices, but you can have them on the table, like a mouse, for instance. The mouse is the surface. You have them on the table, and you will never need to charge that mouse. It's enough to run that mouse.
Yeah, like the calculator, the Casio calculator back in the 80s or 90s.
Yeah, exactly. But they're even more dense now, so they can even be like, I think he said like you can even, he had a little remote control for a game or something, and you can even turn that thing upside down and it will still charge a little bit. They're just much more sensitive now. I'm not a technician, so I don't know exactly know how that works, but he said it does. I thought like that is, there is all these hopeful techniques out there, all that whatever, like tide things they were talking about and all that kind of stuff. There's all these ideas out there, but I think it's just not going fast enough, really.
So inherently, as humans, we just want to make the coolest thing we can think of that runs as efficiently as possible with as little impact as possible. Like in our business.
Yeah.
Right? In my business, in your business that you used to run, you want to be as efficient as possible.
Yeah.
How can I find a better way to do this?
Yeah.
And you don't think we're doing enough of that?
No, I don't. Even myself, as much as I bitch and lecture, I don't. I could do more. Or do certain things less.
Right.
I definitely have started using my bike much more than just use the truck. I can't for work. I can't put my stuff anywhere on my bike. Now I could buy a trailer and an e-bike and then go that way, at least around town, But then the fear is, how long is that e-bike going to be around before it gets stolen? So that opens up a whole other a can of worms, So I threw that idea out the window again. It's tricky. We're in a tricky time, I think, for that part anyway.
Yeah.
There is plenty of other tricky stuff going around these days, but for that part, I feel we are. And, to be honest with you, like sometimes I'm fearing that it messes up my retirement, that I cannot do all the things I wanted to do. Not because I'm hesitant to do them, just because of what's happening around me. That maybe one day our trails will be burned down. I cannot go on my bike ride anymore, or I am a little bit, that stresses me a little bit.
We went on vacation to Fort Steele I'm not sure if you know where that is.
Oh,
It's this old, like, western town.
okay.
And it's, toward the Rockies. It's just outside of Cranbrook.
Okay. Yeah.
And I remember going there as a kid. They have a steam train that runs. And they got all these really cool old balloon framed buildings. It's just neat to walk around. I took a lot of pictures because it's neat to see buildings that have stood, like what you were talking about, the conductor shack.
Yeah.
The test of time.
Yeah.
Right. And they've stood up to this climate that we've built in. One of the most interesting thing that I took away from that was this. They had this display set up in one of the large halls. They had all these different exhibits set up in here. And one of the exhibits that they had was a cross section of this massive fir tree that they were able to obviously date, as they do.
Yeah.
But then they were also able to tie those dates from when it was chopped down, when it was grown, to when Canada confederated, or when the white men landed here in this area and started introducing. One of the things that this tree lived through were 6 prolific fire events.
Okay.
Forest fires.
Yeah.
Which are very distinctly outlined in its cross section.
interesting.
And you can see it's like, holy shit, that
is very cool.
But the coolest thing is that it was cyclical. The forest has a cycle.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And they found that it was like, it burnt 6 times.
Yeah.
But it burnt within this time period.
Yeah.
It wasn't the whole 400-year life cycle of this tree.
Yeah.
It was localized.
Yeah.
It was an more or less isolated event. So, no, I look at this and, Thomas, I've lived here my whole life. I don't remember having forest fires like this all the time.
No.
I don't remember that.
No.
I don't remember having smoky summers.
No.
Up until 2003.
No, even me not living that long in this country,
Yeah, I don't recall.
Yeah.
So when I see something like that, it brings me a bit of comfort because I go, okay, there's a 400-year cross section, and every single one of these fires was isolated to a 35-year time span.
Yeah.
And granted, there were 6 of them.
Yeah.
But it was a short period of time. So then that also helps me to kind of understand that, like maybe some of these glaciers are receding, and that's terrifying from a systems perspective, like what you've described, because of the downstream effect of that, which is a real thing.
Yeah.
Desertification is a real thing.
Yeah.
But what would I rather? Would I rather a warmer climate or a kilometer of ice where you and I are sitting right now?
Yeah.
Which would I prefer?
Yeah.
And I just we have to take all of this information
of course,
that we're being presented with the counter argument.
I think if we essentially would live in a generally warmer climate, obviously, and let's just say we figured all the nice clean things out to keep us cool in the houses,
Correct.
Because we do have the technology, more or less, I believe. So that is definitely an easier way to deal with things than if it's all frozen over. Because you
can't eat anything.
You can't eat anything. You very limited to food sources. Right. We could probably, in Iceland, they just about grow everything there because they have so much earth energy, geothermal. So they just drill a hole and something is coming out warm.
Yeah.
However, it doesn't have much taste. I've been there and I've eaten bananas grown in a greenhouse in Iceland, and they kind of taste cardboardy. They look like a nice banana, but they certainly don't taste like a nice banana.
So the minerality and soil profile is not there.
Probably not. No, probably not. Now, if we have the warmer climate, as long as the water circle somewhat stays, we will probably have no issues, because there were times on this earth where there was no north and no south pole, and there was forests, way up there. They find stuff, they can see that,
That's right.
So it all has worked at one point, but what were the living conditions at that time for those who lived on the planet then, which was mainly animals. I think there was like in the very, very early stages of upright walking, I think there was a time where temperatures were sort of an average around 40 degrees for most of the planet. So maybe at one point we would get used to it again. But I think one of the problem is it goes at a speed right now. Nothing can adapt to it. Because all of these changes which had happened, they probably went over, 50,000, 100,000 years. So plants, animals, whatever lived and walked and swam and crawled and grew was slowly capable of adapting to it. Now it goes so fast, so the adaptation is almost not possible. And they actually can see already that the adaptation happens. Plants cannot move fast enough. They can track that trees start migrating. They move north. Those who don't like the warmer climates, they start moving north. Just from a seedling point of view, they can see that.
They can grow in other environments now. Well,
exactly.
I've always thought to myself, like, how could it possibly be that a landscape that was covered in 2 kilometers of ice is now all of a sudden this arboreal forest or whatever, right? It's like things...
They move. Yeah. And I just learned that. That never even crossed my mind that trees would migrate, but they do. They move with temperature changes up and down, north and south. But it happens so fast, they can't move fast enough, Some move slower than others. Same with animals, like they have adapted to conditions changing. But when you look at these adaptations, they were like hundreds of thousands of years, some of them in shorter periods of time, So that is a little bit, what was it? They use a frog as example.
Yeah, the frog in the water.
Which now water starts moving further north. In the mountains, animals certain start moving higher up because it gets too warm for them.
Yeah. Well, and Thomas, I would say that is, you brought up the point of air conditioning, the environmental separator that we have as our house. It's like, well, when it's really hot here, we're inside. Because you can't be outside.
Yes.
But that period of time is like not that long. It's a couple weeks. And the air conditioning runs in this, like all of our AC units are upstairs. So that we cool all the bedrooms. And then the cold air comes down the stairwell. And it cools this slab.
Yeah.
And just like that passive house you were telling me about in England.
Yeah.
I saw that episode as well. It was a good episode.
Yeah.
You get some benefit from that, the way it's set up. But I mean, that's a very short period of time. Even if it was double the amount of time, if summer was twice as long as it is now, I would much prefer that.
Have it that way,
than this. Let's look at it like this.
Yes.
This,
I agree.
We can't have this for 2 years in a row.
No.
We die.
No.
I just watched something just last night about a massive volcanic eruption somewhere in Asia that blotted out the sun for 2 years. It was 639 or something like that.
Oh, okay.
639.
Yeah.
Right? And there are writings of it.
Yeah.
And bubonic plague came back.
Yeah.
It caused obviously mass starvation and famine and death and destruction of you talk about the Roman Empire. I think they suffered some major losses as a result of this, just because of you're talking about they had a large expanse in their civilization, which required a certain amount of food input. All of a sudden, you don't have the sun to grow shit. Like, what would we prefer? Are we able to adapt to a warmer climate? Because the data shows very clearly that more people on the planet die from cold than heat. And it's not a small percentage like ratio. It's massive.
Right.
Way more people die of cold than heat. So, I look at it and I go, it's not like we're an unintelligent organism in a petri dish. We're able to adapt.
Yes.
And that's what makes me hopeful.
Yes. Well, there's definitely hope. I think there is reason to hope. I'm just, by my nature, the way I see it, I'm just a bit more fearful than hopeful. And basically just from a perspective of how fast we move ahead. That's really the only thing. But I also was kind of a little bit fearful about Y2K and got that was when we still lived up north. And after a little bit of a fight, I got the four of us to buy a generator and hook it up to the motel in case, and nothing happened.
Yes.
Not that it was a bad investment, because we had our electricity like crap out every once in a while, so we actually could use it.
Absolutely.
But still, there would have been no need for Y2K. So I am probably tending rather to that part than being hopeful and optimistic about something which worries me.
Yeah.
But I know I definitely optimistic from the point of that I know the technologies are there and getting better and better and better. So that makes me hopeful. Like the fear is really more my personal fear about the time I still have to spend here and enjoy myself, Very egotistic, but honest.
That's fine. I think we should enjoy.
Oh, definitely.
Like one of the comments that came out of the last interview was, why are we being made to feel guilty for enjoying the system that was set up for us to enjoy? And that's what it feels like, doesn't it? It's like we've set up our entire economy, our entire life, and everything around the consumption of certain fuels.
Yes.
And now we're supposed to feel bad about that? Like what? What? No, that's people's jobs. Those are people's livelihoods, and people build businesses around those models, and those businesses feed communities. This is good. Having good, clean energy, and we have the cleanest energy anywhere in the world that we consume. 93% hydroelectric in this province, right? For energy generation, right? That's incredible. We should be enjoying the fruit of our production, I think. And so I agree with you. You should enjoy it.
Yeah. Oh, I am. I try. It's just, I could also not expose myself to it.
How so?
To the things that worry me.
Insofar as the media that you take in that influences your emotion?
Or that I walk by a car which idles. I'm thinking, why you're idling? There's no need to.
Yeah.
Why are you doing it? The little things. And I know the little things don't make a big difference if one guy does not do it. But we are 7 billion or over 7 billion people. So if most of us do think about the little things, it makes a big impact.
Thomas, I think that is a great place to leave it, unless you have anything else you want to talk about. I think that's a beautiful message.
I was just talking to Dave earlier and said, how long are we going? He said, like 2.5 hours. And I'm like, whoa.
Yeah. Well, no, that we had a lot to talk about.
You know what? You could talk endlessly about this.
We could.
And obviously, we won't be able to solve it here. We maybe can put some positive input out there, hoping some people will listen and will do something. Like when I listened to that Suzuki thing, which is very interesting, and actually showing some hopeful things there.
Yes.
Yeah. There's more going on than we think there is, which is nice.
I'm really hopeful, man.
Yeah.
We were this is such an amazing time to be alive. Like you pick 150 years ago or right now. Now, for various reasons, I would want to be around 150 years ago.
Yes, yeah.
But let me tell you something. Just last week, I had some dental pain.
Yes.
Like really bad. Like 9 out of 10 dental pain.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you ever had dental pain before, but it woke me up and I'm like, like this. Oh, I just went over there and got a CT scan just to find out that I didn't have any cancer in my head, and they gave me some antibiotics.
Yeah.
150 years ago, I'd be dead.
Yeah.
Right?
I know. No, that.
So like, and there are examples like that we can point at in every facet of our experience that are just like, this is awesome. What an awesome, from a construction perspective, the availability of materials, the testing, the technology that we have.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
Yeah, I agree.
So, I think to take your cautious approach and apply that is very useful. You know what I mean? To have that mindfulness that you're describing, to be like, no, let's do things as clean as we possibly can, as clean as we possibly can. Clean job sites, clean factories, clean households like this that are healthy to live in.
Yeah.
Let's have a nice experience.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool.
Cool.
Thomas, thank you very much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Really appreciate it.
That was cool. I liked it.